Tonight is a good night to be talking about cask strength whiskies, I think, because it's a good way to celebrate a couple of things. The first thing is that in some parts of the world, it's a special day. It's Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Cheers. And the second thing is because it's Thanksgiving, that means that it's a memory for me and an anniversary. And it means that tonight is 4 years to the day of the vPub. I'll see you in a minute. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the vPub. Welcome to another Thursday night. Really excited to be hanging. It was just me tonight, just a solo session, but I'm looking forward to that. If you're trying to get my attention tonight, do what everyone's doing right now, and just type Aquavitae and it lights up orange for me to be able to try and catch some of your comments and interact with you. It's always a wee bit easier for me to do that when I'm doing a wee solo affair. But aye, what about that? It only dawned on me earlier this week when I was doing some other things and someone mentioned that it was Thanksgiving this week. And of course, the first ever Thursday that I went live back in 2017 just happened to be out of pure coincidence Thanksgiving. So that reminded me that there was a wee anniversary coming up. We celebrated the anniversary last year because it was 3 years of the vPub. So kind of 3 years, yeah, that was kind of old enough to be legally whiskey. It seemed a good age to be celebrating it, I think. But it's just a wee footnote this year. 4 years, nevertheless, is still quite a thing. Let me start off tonight by saying that, and I was speaking to my wife about this recently, actually, that as you kind of get older, or as the years tick by, a lot of your friendships kind of start to fray a little bit. It's not that they wobble or you fall out. It's just more difficult to keep friendships going because of family and kids, job, relocation. If it's really unfortunate, maybe divorce and crazy things like this. And eventually your friendships kind of become much more fragmented. And I think that leaves a lot of people with a sense of kind of maybe a wee bit of loss. Certainly it did for me. Since I've been doing this thing, I don't have that feeling. I hope for all of you, for everybody that hangs out here live or people that catch it on the replay or the people that have found this community, people that have found connections and friendships, I hope that you kind of get a sense of that as well, that it's a positive experience for you too. It certainly is for me. I'm going to raise a wee glass of this delicious cask strength whiskey that I'm enjoying tonight. And I'm going to say thank you to every one of you for your support over the last 4 years. The fact that I've stuck at this for 4 years is very, very surprising to me. And it could only have happened with your support, believe me. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Slàinte 4 years, eh? Before I get into the topic and before I get into a couple of housekeeping things, I'm just going to jump straight into the chat and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. See how you're all doing tonight. Hellswood is in nice and early, along with Tom R. Wonderful to see you, Tom. I ate too much today. Oh, it's happy Thanksgiving, Tom, of course. That's okay, my friend. Pour a cask strength digestive whiskey, sit back and let it help you take care of what you've eaten. Fantastic to welcome you, my friend. That's Tom out in Illinois. I think you're in Illinois, Tom. Arran is in as well. Fantastic. Hello, Roy. Are you ready to travel? Yeah, more about that in a second. Tomorrow morning, very early. I have to be careful what I'm sipping tonight. I'm heading off to Frankfurt for the InterWhisky Whiskey Fair. Can't wait. The first festival in 2 years. Lee J. Brown is here. Bruno Martins, James McGoran. Wonderful to see you all. Good to see you, James, Bruno, Lee J. Fantastic. Arran Edgerton is in, saying good morning, Roy, from Brisbane, Australia. Good morning straight back to you. Wow, it's Friday morning to you, Arran. Nice to welcome you in, my friend. Alistair Gray's saying good evening, Barflies. Wonderful to see you. Neil Laverty's here. Pete Head, Ross Fudd as well. Superb Ross. Gino Camo, Marcus Kreitner, Max Kreitner. I was actually speaking to Max recently that the very first episode that was ever named vPub was the first comment that Max ever left on the channel as well, and now he's a regular. It's rare that we have a session where Max isn't joining with Christina alongside him. Che Francis is here. Good to see you, Che. Jed Smith, Andrew Pierce, David Owen, Sandro Fazzolari. Sandro, I think you're in Milan, aren't you? Happy for your anniversary, vPub. Buonasera, everybody from Milano, Italy. Fantastic, Sandro. Nice to welcome you in. Superb. Gary Carew is here as well. Greg's Whiskey Guide in Paris. Lindsay Holman, superb. And Jimmy Legg, there he is. He's in. Jimmy from Nova Scotia in the east of Canada. Wonderful to have you, Jimmy. Callum Craig is here, Watchman 999. Fernando, fantastic. So many of you. And Falsgraf is here. Frank Peathead is here. Whiskey Weekend Dram, that's Harrow, superb. Neil Sen Gupta, good to see you, Neil. Just so many of you. Andy C as well, good to see you, Andy. I hope you're doing well. Lee Hosey over at Haddington Whiskey here too. Go Habs, Spiro, my friend, so good to see you. Wonderful stuff. Stephen Toth, oops, it just jumps just as I was about to read. It jumps again. No worries. Roland, Whiskey Radar is here. So good evening, Roy. Catching up with tonight's topic. Just poured a signatory cask strength bottling of 15-year-old Longmorn. What's in your glass? Well, I'm going to start there, shall I? I'll tell you exactly, Roland, what's in my glass. I've started off tonight with the OG of cask strength whiskey, Glenfarclas 105. Interestingly, it's normally a non-age statement, but over the years there have been age statements on Glenfarclas 105, and I'll talk more about this in a wee minute. But on the back, you can see if it focuses there, you can see that there's a 10-year age statement on this bottle. That's not typical. It just so happens that the bottle I have, and I had this on the shelf for a few years before I opened it. Glenfarclas 105 is a staple in the house. But I am almost through this now. There's only a few drams left in this, and every one of them has been enjoyed. But we're going to talk more about that in a wee minute. I'm often amazed at how much choice in whiskey we have today. And when I'm going through the value of going through the process of trying to measure where the value is and things, you know, the VPubs that we do, we say, where's the value? And we try to find out what whiskies are bringing us the best kind of bang for your buck, if you want to use that turn of phrase. That idea that, you know, something that can give you lots of quality, density of flavour, be widely available and not really be costing us too much. Something that's perhaps flying under the radar, something that is not priced to what the market will stand, right? But cask strength whiskies were always kind of bumped out of the equation oftentimes because they're a different thing and they've got to be looked at through a different lens, I believe, in my opinion, than standard core ranges of 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, entry-level non-age statements, whatever they may be. Cask strength kind of are different things pointing towards different people. And I always felt like it would be good to find a way to give them their own session, their own space. I fully imagine that this might also turn into one of those kind of things that we maybe do annually, or certainly, you know, we will repeat this kind of subject again because it's changing and it's changing quickly. So that's what I have in my glass, Roland, and I'm going to talk more about cask strength whiskies in a wee minute. Matthew Edgeworth is saying, "Oh wow, dia dio, Roy. I'm on Edredar 2008 cask strength." That's Matthew. I wonder what that means. Dia diut maybe means good evening. Good evening straight back to you if I've guessed that right, Matthew. Thank you. Thank you for supporting through the Aquavite Barflies. For anybody that doesn't know, if you click the join button down below, what you're doing is keeping all of the VPub free of ads through the support of the Barflies. It means I never need to monetize any of the VPubs. That's super helpful for anybody who's listening podcast style or dropping in and out, picking up on the replay, or even watching it live. You never ever need to sit through advertisements. So thank you for supporting through the Barflies. Whiskey Malt Content is here as well. That's Vlad. He's saying my top one cask strength of this year was the Bunnahabhain Vintage 2009. Great dram. Cheers to all Barflies. I think they've just about to release, or they just have released, their 2010 vintage as well. And I think the vintage statements have replaced their old 57% ABV or 100 imperial proof or 100 degrees proof in the old branding. So in the new branding, they're following that theme of vintage statements. I have to say that it's the one out of the range that I connect with the most. And I think that's got everything to do with the extra flavour, the extra power, the extra density that's packed in with higher ABV, but a huge amount to do with filtration. I'm fairly sure of that. We'll talk about that a wee bit later, I think. Vlad, thank you very much for your dram, my friend. It's wonderful to have you in. And Tim G's bought my wee dram as well to say, finally got round to Deanston 12 after your gentle nudge. A gentle nudge. Well, Tim, that's been 5 years of gentle nudging, I have to say. Deanston 12 remains. As long as it's as good value and as good quality as it is today, it's going to remain a staple on my shelf. I love it, Tim, and I hope that you're enjoying it too. Thank you very much to Tim and Vlad for your drams. Cheers. I have to be careful what I'm drinking tonight because, as Luna pointed out, I'm leaving very early in the morning to head over to Frankfurt for the InterWhisky fair. This will be my third time. It should have been my fourth time, but of course it was cancelled last year. And it's a fantastic event. It's a fantastic fair. You know, most of the usual suspects are there. It's a beautiful venue, and it's in Frankfurt. We've got lots of Barflies there. Doc is located in Frankfurt. It turns out Stefan Novak is in Frankfurt as well. There's people coming in. Era is coming in from Belgium. Rolf is coming in from Norway. Chris is coming in from England. So there's going to be a wee gathering there. Now, it's not going to be the big gathering. We can't plan big gatherings yet. Everything is still quite fraught and balanced on a knife edge. The numbers in Germany, in terms of the dreaded C situation, are a bit tricky, but it looks like we're going to make it. We just have to take extra precautions. I'm very much looking forward to heading out there tomorrow morning, but it means that I've got to be careful, especially with cask strength whiskies, what I'm sipping tonight. I need to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for my cab turning up in the morning. Hey, Roy, thanks for going opposite of last week. That's right. We want to keep things switching up and being fresh. I loved, Jimmy, I absolutely loved last week. It was just great fun to be sitting here with Roddy again. I think after, in retrospect, you probably understand why we were so rosy-cheeked last week, because Roddy made the Rod Roy accidentally, but kind of serendipitously. He made this Rod Roy with double the amount of Ardnamurchan cask strength, and it was delicious for it. And that started the night off in a very nice way, a very delicious way, and it just kind of continued. It was great fun. I'm really glad you enjoyed it as well, Jimmy. Whisky Games Matthewson, my East Linton Whisky Society is meeting tomorrow night for the first time in 18 months. And Highland Park Cask Strength Batch 2 is on the list of whiskies. It's also on the list of whiskies tonight, Matthew. So I'll be interested if we can compare notes a wee bit and see what you think versus what I think. It may be one of the ones I tried tonight. A lot of whiskies to get through, if I'm honest. Let's do a wee bit of housekeeping before I skip forward. I'm going to drop a link in, and I'll actually pin it as well. We've been fundraising for Kidney Kids Scotland. This week it's a wee bit different. I want to show you something here. This is Frank Peathead's handiwork. I hope you can see this. You might recognize the glass shape that this is. Our favorite standard whiskey drinking vessel. This is hand turned out of wood. It still smells absolutely fantastic. And Frank gifted this to me a couple of years ago, and it's been much admired by a lot of you folk out there, and by people that come and visit the house and things. Well, you can get yourself one of these because there is a fundraiser tonight happening at the New Dram Drinker channel. Then they've done this a few times. A very benevolent channel. It's Nikki and Anthony down at New Dram Drinker. They've put together this auction site where there's lots of whiskey flavoured things you can bid for. I'm going to drop it in here. Maybe you can open a wee browser tab or something and pick it up a bit later. But I think you might enjoy getting your hands on some of the things they've got up for auction. Not least one or two, I think there's 3 of Frank's wooden Glencairns available too. So good luck, everybody. I hope you get your hands on some of those. It's for a very good cause. Myeloma UK, fantastic work by the Certified Originals down at New Dram Drinker under the stewardship of Nikki and Anthony. Lovely stuff. I also want to mention quickly as well, there's quite a few of you in. This is Thanksgiving, and I know that there's a chance that a lot of people are going to be otherwise occupied in North America over Thanksgiving. But the vPub goes out on a Thursday night, and it doesn't matter. I'm still going to put it out on a Thursday night, and you can pick it up on the replay or whatever. But a lot of folks still manage to turn in, maybe as you're slumped on a couch or something and recovering from a nice turkey dinner or whatever it may be. But later tonight, Eric Waite is doing a Thanksgiving broadcast, and he's centering Lagavulin as the topic. So after I finish tonight, I'm going to try to finish for midnight tonight. This is going to be a 2-hour stream. Of course it is, Roy. You can skip over to Eric Waite Whiskey Studies and hang out with him if you want to keep the Thanksgiving post-dinner drams going. So good luck, Eric, with your stream tonight. Fantastic. Let me tell you a wee story as I start to go through these things. Glenfarclas 105 was the OG, launched in 1968, the first ever cask strength official bottling to be available anywhere. And it's only a few years, 4 or 5 years after, Glenfiddich was the first ever branded fully official single malt available. Now, yes, there were malts bottled and there were malts available before that. And yes, they did bear the distillery name. But they weren't available. They certainly weren't exported. And the chances are you had to physically be parked right next door to the distillery to be able to get your hands on it, or you had to know somebody, or you had to know somebody that knew somebody else, or you had to go to a very, very specialist spot to be able to pick it up. Malts started in the 60s, and Glenfiddich are widely credited with starting that whole thing, and rightly so. But there were lots of other pioneers. Just to frame tonight, the story I'm going to share with you, Graham Young's bought my wee dram quickly. Just a quick check in with my favourite group of wonderful whiskey folk. Cheers, and a raised Bunnahabhain 100 proof. That's the one I was mentioning. Graham, fantastic to you all. Cheers. Cheers right back at you, Graham Young. Cheers. Thank you for your dram, my friend. If we go back to the 1960s and we consider the very few malts that were available back then, Glenmorangie was just dipping their toe in the water. Glenfarclas was available. Glenlivet was available. Throughout the 60s, you started to see brands represented that were putting their own product out there. They had the depths of stock to be able to put out a single malt. And this was going into it was pointed at the exact same people that were currently buying blends. That's what it was pointed at. So it followed the same kind of, it would have been put on the same shelf as a blend. It would have had the same presentation as a blend, typically 40 and 43% ABV, of course. And it would have just been seen as Scotch whisky. And if you'd asked a lot of people back then, and even now, honestly speaking, even in Scotland, to define the difference between a blend and a single malt, people will tell you that one's malt and one isn't, maybe, but that's about as far as they would get. I think a lot of people would struggle to define what actually makes the two different. And that's to be understood. Back in the 1960s, there's a famous story of Stanley P. Morrison, the Stanley Morrison, welcoming a writer to Bowmore Distillery on Islay. I shared this story with patrons earlier this week. And as he gave this writer a tour of the distillery, and the writer was fascinated and he was offered a whiskey, he accepted, said, yes, I'd love to try a whiskey. Stanley Morrison took him to the lab and poured him a blend where Bowmore was very well represented. It was a constituent part of the blend. However, the writer asked for a pour of Bowmore malt. He wanted to taste the whiskey, of course, that was made at the distillery. Now, this is back way before visitor centres were a thing on Islay. Maybe the only visitor centre that was even close to being realised was Glenfiddich, and probably at that time it hadn't opened yet. So the idea of having product available from that distillery, it wasn't a thing. To the point that Stanley actually said, you want to try Bowmore on its own? Do you think it'll taste nice on its own? That's incredible. There's also a famous video on YouTube called The Whiskey Island. It's a 1960s footage from Scottish television back in the day. A wonderful piece of film to watch. Search for it. I'll perhaps be mindful enough to link it below after, so you can watch it after the replay. but it's called the Whisky Island. And Bessie Williamson of Laphroaig is in there as well. The amazing, wonderful Bessie, right? And she talks about it. This is in context. This is the 1960s. She mentions that Laphroaig is an essence, a seasoning for blends. It's not intended to be drank on its own, although she does concede that some people like it that way. So just to frame this whole landscape in the 1960s, malt in Scotland existed for one purpose only, with very few distractions, and that was to produce product to go into blends. It was there to make blends. So this whole single malt thing that we live in today, it feels like it's always been there. But relative to whiskey, it's actually fairly new. Of course, malt whiskey is not new, but the ability to buy branded products from the distilleries themselves is a very new concept. For a couple of drams come in, Anthony Dunn saying, happy Thursday. Have a great vPub and Thanksgiving. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thanks for your dram. And Prime Whiskey is saying, great content as always, Roy. Cheers. Thank you, Prime Whiskey. That looks like a new name. I'm not very sure. It looks like that you could be in Sweden, perhaps. Anyway, Prime Whiskey and Anthony, cheers to you both. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to finish off. Look at this 105. I'm getting through it. And it's delicious. It's fantastic. It's very, very powerful, very densely flavoured. It's only got a wee drop of water in it, just a wee teardrop or two. It does very, very well from adding a bit more water, more than just activating it with a few drops, but just diluting it a wee bit to see what other fruits and flavours you can bring out. But I'll be doing that throughout tonight because that one is gone. Let's park that one to the side as well. That one's going to be a wee bit later too. I'm going to pour something else right now as well. And I'm going to pour it and leave it sitting because this is what's inspired us to do this cask strength session tonight. This appeared on our shelves very recently, or it appeared on websites very recently. I'm sure it's appearing on shelves right about now. This is a very familiar label, isn't it? This is Bunnahabhain's 12-year-old. But look here, you can see it's gold and burgundy, slightly different colour scheme. And it says cask strength here. They've actually written on here 2021 edition, so this is going to be, it looks like an annual release. And this one in 2021 has come out at 55.1% ABV. Now, this has set the heather alight, this one. Everybody's talking about it. You can understand why. It's a very, very clever move by Bunnahabhain to bring this out because they are at a peak of popularity right now based on the amazing presentation and quality at a good price that they've been bringing for the last decade. You go back to 2008, 2009, 40% Bunnahabhain, nobody was screaming about that one. They're screaming about the current Bunnahabhain. Make no mistake. Let's pour a wee drop of this. Now, I've had a few drams out of this. I don't know if you can see the level down to about here. This is probably my 4th dram of this, small drams, throughout this week, trying to get to know it a wee bit. But I can tell you something, it's one of those whiskies that's going to need a wee bit of patience from you. All cask strength whiskies are. Make sure I'm not missing anything here. But this is the whiskey that's inspired this content tonight. This is what I wanted to talk about, why I wanted to talk about cask strength whiskies. I wanted to give this one its place. I wanted to see how it stacks up against the other cask strengths that are available out there. And then consider this whole idea as, well, why do we even have cask strength whiskies available? And why are they kind of sitting there alongside you? That's Bunnahabhain now have 2 12-year-old expressions. So a lot of people are going to say, well, why? So it makes sense to talk about it. Sweden is correct, says Prime Whiskey, been a barfly for some time. Sorry, you probably have. I can see that you're a barfly too. I wonder, Prime Whiskey, is it a channel? Is it an Instagram account? Is it something? Cool wee logo there as well. Jimmy Lag is saying, wouldn't you say that a Bunna is a bit of a pioneering cask strength whiskey as well? I would, Jimmy. I would say that they have done very, very well. When a Bunna first came out, there would have been very little available of that style of whiskey. A Bunna was this idea to, a Bunna is literally Gaelic for the original. So it was this idea to bring this 19th century style of whiskey back to life again and to make it available to everybody. That is malt that was not diluted, that didn't have water added to it before it was bottled, that it was presented at cask strength, almost straight from the cask, more or less. That was the idea behind a Bunna. And it's done very, very well. A Bunna used to be great value. You used to be able to pick up a Bunna for 45, 50 pounds. It's a wee bit more expensive now. That's understandable. I think they managed to keep the price aggressive for long. The problem with a Bunna is that it didn't just creep up. It just kind of step changed and jumped up. In the UK, of course, overnight. But it's still a fantastic whiskey. Really fantastic. And I agree, Jimmy, that it is a bit of an OG in its own right. The cask strength whiskies I have at the moment, says Falsgraf, are Irish single cask malt. And tonight I had a longing for Scotch. So Falsgraf, maybe you didn't have any cask strength Scotch. There's going to be a lot of whiskies paraded in front of you tonight. I'm going to try and get through them quite quickly. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying Prime Whiskey is a YouTube channel from Sweden, of what I know, Roy. Quite a cool one, different too. I wonder if they broadcast in Swedish or English. But I noticed the logo. I'll have a wee look at your content. That's fantastic. Nice to welcome you in here. Legia saying, Roy, not up and wine yet, waiting for Christmas. Also, thanks for the advice and help. Sorry, not contacted your brother yet, but we'll do so soon. Club is on the move. Fantastic, Legia. My brother got a taste of some amazing whiskies in the last couple of weeks, let me tell you. Jimmy Leg is saying also, and that there were multiple batches each year. That's right. It was a numbered batch. It wasn't to do with a year or anything. It wasn't one or two. They basically just did batch by batch by batch and turned them out. They're up at batch 70, I think, now, Aberlour Bunna. And I think the first one came out, I'm going to guess it was 2003, 2004, something like that, batch one. I might be mistaken there. But they're up at batch 70 already, so you're right, Jimmy. Adrian Mejias, I hope you're having an amazing Thanksgiving. I hope you are too, Adrian. Nice to welcome you here. And Helen is saying, Kilkerran 8-year-old for us. Marvellous. Well, Helen, let's move on with this thing. The whole reason that cask strength whiskies exist, the whole reason that Glenfarclas came out in the late 60s with their 105, it was originally an 8-year-old product, but over the years, it's kind of changed labelling a wee bit. It's had an age statement and then not had an age statement. Now, these days, we're currently buying it, I believe, is non-age statement. Like I say, occasionally there was an age statement that appeared on the back label like this one, but not always. But it didn't set the heather alight. It wasn't a huge thing. It wasn't there weren't lots of other producers got on board with the concept of releasing their whiskey at cask strength. It was considered that it was just too powerful for the market. You know, it was too overtly strong an alcoholic drink, that it wouldn't be popular. It would be a very niche, very specialist thing. And that's kind of understandable. So there weren't a lot of people to follow in the footsteps of Glenfarclas throughout the 60s and 70s. Anthony's bought another redraft to say, has anyone found value in this Black Friday? I'm sure everybody will be up early tomorrow morning to see what's available for sale on most of the sites. I know there's been deals throughout the week, and there are wee deals going on. I wish everybody luck in grabbing themselves a wee bargain. I hope you're doing it from home. Ross is saying, I'm still in love with last year's Kilchoman cask strength. Aye, that was one that came out around about Christmas time. Would that be right? Or was that 2 years ago that happened now? Wow. Florb X-Ray, that looks like a new name. My first and only so far cask strength whiskey was Aberlour Bunna 65. I wonder, Florb, how did you get on with it? Did you enjoy it? I bet you did. I bet you probably want to replace it. Fast forward to the 1980s. And before I go through this parade of whiskies here, I'm going to share another cool wee story with you as well. This came from the same research I was doing for this wee show tonight. There was a working class traveller, an aspirational working class guy, let's call him that, who liked the outdoors, he liked to travel, and he liked to take trips up into the Highlands. And on one such trip, a friend located there took him to meet a friend that was a farmer. And the farmer took him back to his house when he heard that he enjoyed whiskey. Next to the fireplace, there was a quarter cask of malt whiskey sitting, and the farmer offered him a pour of this whiskey. The gentleman said, yes, absolutely, that would be lovely. And he took a glass of this stuff, and it immediately changed everything that he understood about whiskey in a second. he was incredulous. He could not believe what was in this glass. And he asked him, this is like nothing I have ever tasted. What is this? And the farmer told him that it was a quarter cask of Glenfarclas, that every now and again he could jump in his old Land Rover and take a trip across to Glenfarclas distillery. This was the early 80s, remember, late 70s perhaps, and pick up a quarter cask and pay for it cash and leave it at the fireside and take a dram when he wanted it or share it with friends or whatever. Well, I can tell you that that man, that aspirational working class man, was Pip Hills. Now, Pip was struck because he wanted to understand why this whiskey in this pure form was not available to buy. Back then, late 70s, early 80s, and like the decades before that, if you wanted to try whiskey of that quality, you had to be able to be a wee bit like that farmer. You had to have a relationship where you could buy a wee quarter cask or a barrel for yourself, or you had to know a distillery worker who could get it for you, or you had to be able to steal it. It was very difficult to get your hand on the purest form of the creature, right? It was just not distributed. Was not bottled, certainly not officially. Even independents that existed back then tended not to put out cask strength, Gordon MacPhail, Cadenheads. It would have been, for the most part, with very few exceptions, they would have been put out at 40, 43%, what the market expected. Cask strength was not a thing. So let's go back to, I had a really cool bottle here. This is not an original bottle, but it will give you an idea what the styling is like. Let's go back to 1983. And the original bottles from SMWS would have looked a wee bit like this. Bottle 1.1 was indeed, ended up being a Glenfarclas. I did manage once upon a time to try a masterclass at the Old and Rare in Glasgow. I got to try a pour of the 1.1, and of a privilege it was too. I can tell you that it was a 1975 vintage, but bottled in 1983. It was only 8 years old. Nevertheless, it was fantastic whiskey. But obviously, it's since spent 35 years in glass. Just consider that for a second, what I've mentioned to you there. Malt whiskey is virtually unsipped, and it's for its own sake, for the sake of malt. There are brands that have been out there doing their thing. Macallan are on the scene now. Glenlivet, as I say, Glenmorangie, Glenfarclas, and of course the original Glenfiddich. So cask strength is even less available. So it takes somebody to get together with his friends and make a club in the shape of SMWS to start to make this available. And it just explodes. More and more people want to get involved when they taste this brand new thing. They can't believe that this has been made in Scotland for all of this time, and they feel a wee bit like it's been almost hidden from them. It's quite incredible. If you go back to 1983 and consider how little cask strength whiskey was available anywhere, and then build forward from that, you could argue that point, 1963 for Glenfiddich, 1968 for Glenfarclas released in the 105, 1983 for SMWS, 1988 for the Classic Malt series being launched. All of these are kind of benchmark years in this thing propelling whiskey forward and giving it that real injection of adrenaline that it needed to support all of these retailers that have been doing it for so long, Cadenheads, Gordon MacPhail, to support these brands that are getting this idea of malt as a concept out there. But tonight we're just focusing on cask strength, because even then, throughout the 80s and the 90s, it was slow. The attitude was that cask strength whiskey is too powerful for most people's palates. And it didn't really take hold. Well, I can tell you that I am surrounded by bottles tonight, surrounded by bottles that are all united in being official bottles at cask strength. So, of course, there are lots and lots of single cask, lots and lots of small batch releases through independents. There are even occasionally single cask releases under official branding as well in small batch. But tonight we're talking about official core range cask strength bottles. Falscraft said, funny that this was not offered on the market, since workers did get stuff like teapot drams. If you worked in a distillery, you knew what it tasted like, of course. If you knew somebody that worked in a distillery, if you had a way to acquire devil's share, right? Maybe something that had been sneaked out in an old pipe or glass bottle or welly boot or whatever it was, you could maybe try what this thing was. But the general public couldn't buy it, and it certainly was never exported in any volume. Rob Halford is saying, how can we define a bottle as cask strength? Does the distiller have to write it on the bottle? I have the Arran sherry cask at 55.8%, but I'm not sure if it's a true cask strength whiskey. Good point, Rob. Cask strength is not a legal definition. You will find things like this has cask strength written on it, which I think, I'm going to forgive Glenfarclas for writing that. They coined the term, come on. Cask, they didn't maybe coin the term, but they were the first to put it on a label. But every single release of 105 is at 60% ABV, because 60% is 105 imperial proof, which is 105. Why it's called 105, which is equivalent to 120 proof American. So this is adjusted. I don't think they vat this to get it at 60% perfectly each time. I think that Glenfarclas is going to tend to be a wee bit higher, and they'll just reduce it a wee bit to get it at 60% each time. Interestingly, Glenfarclas have released 105s up to the age of 40 years old at 60% ABV. Quite incredible. Anyway, so the term cask strength is not a legally defined thing. So some bottles will have cask strength written on there. And if I look at this Arran sherry cask that you mentioned, Rob, it does say natural cask strength on the label, and the cask type a sherry hogshead 250 litre. So it does say cask strength on there, and mine is 55.8% to Rob as well. Nielsen Gupta saying, may I ask what teapot dram is? Teapot dram is a release from Glengoyne, and the reason they call it teapot is that back in the days, in order for you to encourage your distillery staff not to steal the whiskey, you would give them it for free, a practice that was called dramming. And it was dependent, distillery to distillery was a bit different. Sometimes it was morning, sometimes later in the evening, sometimes it was more than once a day. And you got given a nice cup or a glass of whiskey during your break. Some people at Glengoyne, as the story goes, didn't enjoy this super, super powerful whiskey. Some people that didn't drink whiskey, or some people that maybe didn't enjoy very, very powerful whiskey. So they were encouraged to take their measure, to take their pour, but keep it for the other folk by tipping it into a copper teapot that was in the canteen. Hence the term teapot comes around. And then what the other people could do, even though it wasn't time for them to get their dram or whatever, there was always a wee bit spare left in the copper teapot in the canteen. So even though that dramming has been long time gone, for about 30, 40 years now, it's disappeared from the landscape for obvious reasons. It's a kind of nod to those days. The teapot dram is a nod to those days. What you would have been shared, or what would have been given to you, would have been not very precious whiskey, not very mature or old whiskey, not very valuable stuff. It would have been quite young and vibrant and bold whiskey, and that's very much what teapot dram is meant to commemorate. Falscraft is saying, if somebody like Arran writes natural cask strength, I would assume they really mean that. Would not trust anyone completely with that. Well, you take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, you just look at the ABV. Do you care if it's, let's say it was 54.1 and it's been watered down by a couple of points, or it's at 60.1 and it's been watered down by a couple of points? Do we really care? We can see that the ABV is up there, so we can see the intention of the whiskey. I wouldn't read too much into that until such a point where they define what cask strength is, that it has to be something where no water has been added, no dilution has been added prior to bottling. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know if it'll happen. It depends how popular cask strength gets as a thing. But I wouldn't be so uptight. Cask strength is literally, you can have cask strength at 40% ABV. Honestly, you can. If the cask has lost that much alcohol over time, or whatever it may be, you can see. I have seen cask strengths released at barely above 40%. It's still cask strength. There is no water being added. But generally, what we're talking about here is something where, you know, the whiskey has been presented as an official release, and the ABV is up there. It's 50% and above. the density of flavour, the grip, the texture, the oiliness, the spice, the power, the impact, everything is intended to be intact. And more often than not, they tend to be quite young whiskies as well. Anthony Runn is saying, not to be biased as an Irishman, but Redbreast 12 Cask Strength, batch regardless, is some of the best whiskey I've ever had. Great value too. We might touch on that very bottle, Anthony, a wee bit later as well, and I enjoy it too, very much so. Highland Hamage is saying, no coincidence that the robust palates of whiskey YouTubers are spreading the word about higher ABV malts, especially for the Scots, if we view it as getting more for our money. Hoyt, you've hit the nail right on the head. This is what I'm going to talk about tonight. There was a time that cask strength whiskies were actually a very good way to get a wee bit extra bang for your buck. But we live in strange times now in whiskey, and often the releases are not about, we need to make this amount of margin, we need to make this amount of profit, so let's work out what this cost is, let's add on that margin and that gives us a retail. That's not what's happening. These are businesses intended to be profitable, and they've got shareholders to answer to, and they've got boards, and they've got foreign ownership, and they've got all of this stuff going on, and it means that they have to be seen to be doing very, very well. So often the bottle ends up on the market at the price that that market will stand. Much more lucrative margins are being made because there are expressions already out there in the market. There are peer products that they compare against to say, look, people are paying that for this, so they will pay this for that. That's fine. I don't want to challenge those dynamics that I can do nothing about. But what I will do is I'll sit here with the whiskies with you this evening, and I'll tell you my honest opinion of them. I've been sipping a lot of cask strength whiskey over the last 2 weeks in order to get my head around some of these whiskies and discover where I think actually the flavour, the quality, and the value lies. Price plays a huge, huge part, and I'm going to get to that. I am going to start off by saying I have loved every glass that I've poured and shared from this bottle of 105. This is an exceptional wee bottle of whiskey. It's very powerful. You want to be careful, the mood you're in, the condition that you're in, and you want to have water on hand to get the most out of this. That's true of every whiskey that I'm going to talk about tonight. It's fiddly stuff. You can take this, sit on the couch and sip it neat, but it'll be half sips because it's very powerful most of the time. To get the best out of these whiskies, sit with a wee glass of water on the side and a wee dropper. I've got a wee plastic one that's a bit less fragile that I'm using tonight, and use water to get the best out of these whiskies. If it is not the type of thing that you do, please just do it once or twice. First, just add a wee teardrop or two. That's enough, just to break things up, just to waken up the whiskey, it's almost like those raindrops that fall after a really hot summer day, right? It only takes a few raindrops to hit that ground and you smell everything. You can smell that summer rain, you can smell the ground, you can smell everything happening. It's a wee bit like that, in my mind at least, what's happening here. And it just brings the whiskey alive, it wakes it up. Very high ABV. So when you stick your nose right in a glass like I've just done, for every nice smell and aroma and bold note that you're taking out, you're anesthetizing your senses. You absolutely are. It's very, very high strength whiskey. But you know, we're not here to analyze. We're not blenders. We're just enjoying our whiskey. So do what you enjoy. And then sip it. And then add a wee scoosh of water next time around. A bit more. Maybe a wee half teaspoon, a wee quarter teaspoon, and do it more and more and more. Maybe you'll get to the point, like all whiskies, where you drown it, but it's okay, it's only 1 dram, and by then you've worked out where the sweet spot might be for you. But I guarantee the biggest fun that you can get out of cask strength whiskies, most of the time, is with a wee splash of water. Cheers. Greg's Whiskey is saying a contemporary statement I enjoy is batch strength, because it is clear that it is the measure of the result of a blend of casks. Rounded cask strength, say 60%, is often approximative. Greg, again, batch strength is not legally defined. I think any of these whiskies could potentially bear that statement. But as long as we get the spirit of what the intention is, what they're actually meaning there. So I would say that if we had like a positive experience, bucket tier, this Glenfarclas would certainly go in there. A negative experience over here, and then somewhere in the middle. That's kind of where they're all going to come tonight. And price is going to play a huge part of this. Glenfarclas 105 is rarely above £50. Think about that. Even when it's not carrying an age statement, we know it to be about 8, 9, 10 years. I think it rarely drops below 8-year-old whiskey. 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 9-year-old cask strength whiskey for less than £50, and it's delicious. It is delicious. If you doubt it, just have a wee look at the blind challenge we did on the run-up to Christmas last year, where it was cask strength sherry-style whiskies we were using for that. Glenfarclas did very, very well, and it was our budget entry. I'm going to move on quickly. I'll pop that to the side. I'm going to run out of clean glasses tonight. I know that I am. I've got something that's new to me. This is Highland Park's Batch 2. This is Batch 2 of their cask strength release. This is super interesting to me. We've got Edrington, a distillery that most of the products that come out at, I say most, not all of them, but most of the products that come out from Edrington, certainly their core range, is chill filtered and below the ABV that enthusiasts tend to enjoy. So Highland Park in the UK tends to be 40% at 12-year-old. They've got a 10-year-old out there at 40%. Sorry, the 12 I think is 43, sorry. Now, other than that, it's pretty good stuff. It's good quality spirit. It's always natural colour, fantastic, well done. But the ABV is often a wee bit light. In order to enjoy Highland Park at cask strength, we've had to go to independence over the past. But what do we have here? A large vatting, a large-scale release on Batch 2 now of their own take. Now, I've had a couple of samples from Batch 1, and this is only maybe the second or third I've had out of this bottle of the Batch 2. But suddenly I've got a Highland Park on the shelf that I'm enjoying. Don't get me wrong, I do still enjoy the 12 if I'm in the mood, and I do still enjoy the 18 if I'm in the mood. It's kind of nice to have them there, but they're no longer staples for me. If I'm going to have a Highland Park as a staple now, I've got something that's there that is actually something that I can enjoy, something that I might not find so easy to reach past. Now, this is a non-age statement whiskey. We don't know how old it is. It's so powerful. It's so dense. And it's got the Highland Park thing. It's got the kind of, for me, it's always like almost like a marmalade note, certainly aromatic. You hunt for the smoke and the peat that you know is there, but it doesn't always show. Tends to be something that maybe coats the glass that you'll pick up in a glass or an empty glass. Not a lot of smoke for somebody that drinks a lot of peated whiskey for sure. But there's a lot of flavour here. There's a lot of dark orange citrus. There's a ridiculously long finish, and all of this communicative power is coming from that extra ABV. And the finish is assisted hugely by that ABV and this lovely mouth coating texture that cask strength whiskies tend to come with. So it coats your palate and it sits on the palate for longer, and you're tasting it for longer. These half sips that you're taking go much, much further. So this little tiny pour lasts you a long time. It's a fallacy that these super strong cask strength whiskies are dangerous to drink. They're so powerful that they command your respect. You can't knock these back. You can't drink these easily, casually, and forget that you're sipping whiskey. Every sip is going to wake up every one of your senses. A wee bit sour, a wee bit malty. It is quite cereally, but not too much, I would say, and it's kind of like a ripe cereal, if that makes any sense. £60. 63.9% ABV, very high ABV. That's higher than the standard industry fill strength. So that suggests that these casks at Highland Park have been filled higher than the standard 63.5%. This is a good whiskey. I'd say that at £60, I want to grumble about the price, but I can't. I can't. Maybe a fiver or so. £50, £55, that's the kind of sweet spot. There would be nothing to talk about. £60, but it's Highland Park. It's a very well-known brand. They're trading on the brand. They're not taking the mickey. £5 or £10 too high. I hope that makes sense. Yash is saying, looking forward to this. I tried the Highland Park Cask Strength Batch 2 in a tasting last week, and it was delightful. Changed so much with different levels of water. I don't doubt that for a second, Yash. I'm going to try just a wee drop in there, just to see if it brings out more of that kind of citrus, more of that fruit. That's what I would expect. More of that kind of malty character. It's almost, it does make you think of like a sweet, malty, very aromatic. So you're thinking red apple skins, baked apple. The orange is still there. The water has kind of brought out a sharper freshness to the fruit, I think. It's now moving into more of this kind of baked apple thing. It's gorgeous. Very good winter dram, absolutely. Still no smoke, but it's seasoned. It's got that nice richness. It's got that flavour. You do feel like you'll be able to sit with this and unpack things a wee bit more. And it's got that Highland Park thing. That aromatic thing. That marmalade-y thing. The thing I interpret as marmalade. It's a really good dram. So I'm going to put this in the middle. I'm going to put it in the middle bucket. So we've got Glenfarclas over here in the aye, absolutely bucket. We've got Highland Park sitting in the middle. I would recommend this to most folk, but I would also suggest that there are things out there that they can get a wee bit cheaper, regardless. If they like their Highland Park and they're willing to pay £59 that I paid for this, they're not going to go far wrong. I don't think they're going to regret it. So we'll put this in the centre. Next, we're going to look at a few wee low-cost cask strength whiskies. Now, you're going to recognise these tops, aren't you? But let me show you what's open right now. This is what's been open for a while right now. This is, of course, Arran. And this is their cask strength release. It's the Bothy. This is good value, 53.8% ABV, bottled at cask strength, one of 13,800 bottles, it tells me this, and this was bottled back in April 2018. So this was just a few months before the Arran went through the rebranding. Now you can see how much I enjoy this because you can see I've got a backup bottle ready and waiting. But I had intentions to do things with this. I wanted to see how much things are changing at Arran, just to see if it was discernible, because this is probably the purest form of Arran, right? This is very, very kind of grain forward, spirit forward Arran bottled here. We don't know what the age is. I'm going to guess it's 7-year-old whiskey, 8-year-old whiskey, that type of thing. It tends to be, you can buy this for £44 right now. Normally it's 48. I think the RRP is about 48, 49.50, that kind of order. But there are some of our ethically supported retailers as part of the OSWA program. If you go to oswa.co.uk, go to the retailers page, and you'll see the retailers who are promising not to shaft us when we nominate whiskies as part of the OSWA's initiative. They're going to freeze prices for 2021. So these are retailers that have ethical policies in place that they follow. So I was going to take these two Arrans and open the new one together, and just kind of let the bottle, let the level drop, and just see if things are changing at Arran, because I think that things are changing. I think things are getting better at Arran all the time, and I think this would have been a nice way to try and examine that. Got some messages in super chat coming in. It's Toby, member for 21 months at the Barflies. HP charged £50 for 70 CL of their new make at 50%. Wow, that's new make, and that's probably at the distillery as well. You do not need to buy 70 CL of new make. You only need to buy a wee bottle of new make, unless you really, really love new make. But I think that is a wee bit pricey. And I think it's probably at the distillery, and that's extra annoying, because if you make the pilgrimage all the way up to Orkney, you want to be given good value. Vicky Thompson is saying, use a good luck charm for HR Team of the Year award in Glasgow. Laphroaig on hand for the announcement. Oh, Vicky, I wish you the very, very best of luck. That would be amazing. That Laphroaig could go down very, very nicely if you were lucky there tonight. Thank you, Vicky, for your virtual dram. Cheers. Rossford is saying, is the bothy in honour of Ralphie? A bothy is a shelter, usually a communal shelter, something that would be outdoors for people to use because they need it, because they're workers, because they're gardeners, because they're walkers, hill walkers, or whatever it may be. Some bothies don't even have doors and windows. They're literally just a stone shelter. That's what a bothy is, Tom. So Ralphie has a wee bothy in the Isle of Man, absolutely. And the bothy, I don't know where they took their inspiration from it, but you would imagine that this is the type of whiskey that if you're in a cold, blowy, drafty bothy taking shelter from inclement weather, something powerful and warming like this is what you would want to have in the glass. So there you go. Jimmy Legacy, do you know or think that Arran realises how much we enthusiasts think of what they're doing? Oh, aye, absolutely. And it's there's no accidents here. They haven't stumbled upon something, Jimmy. Arran have fully focused on, they know who their market is, they know who's going to buy the product, and they know what they're after. Yes, they're going to try and keep the prices aggressive. They're going to have entry-level whiskies in there as well, but the range from there on forwards is going to be quality, as good quality as they can make at a good, attractive price point. Arran and I think Springbank and a few others are really leading the way. If you ever want to kind of judge the value of other whiskies that are released out there, we've got these torchbearers in the shape of Springbank, Arran, and a couple others too that you can say, aye, well, okay, that's good value. And I will be using them a wee bit tonight. So I'm not going to open this tonight. I'm not going to do that comparison. I think that'll happen maybe at some point in the future. There's another couple here that are kind of add-ons that have made it into the mix because I have them here on the shelf, and they're worth talking about. But just before I move away from Arran, actually, I've still got this one here. As if Arran didn't give us enough, Jimmy Leg, they also give us 2 cask strength releases. Now, this came up earlier. Rob was talking about it, wasn't he? He was talking about the sherry cask release at cask strength. So they're giving us their standard cask strength release, which is mostly American oak ex-bourbon. There may be some sherry casks in there, I'm not entirely sure, but this kind of much purer form of Arran. And they're also giving us this deliciously powerful and affordable sherry cask expression. So the people that are sad about having to pay £75 plus for their Abuna these days suddenly have an Arran available in a similar theme at £55 or less. This is going to start selling out. Once people realise the engagement and the deliciousness and the value of this at £55, it's going to be harder to get a hold of. Arran Sherry Cask, it's a non-age statement, 55.8% ABV, as Rob said. Fantastic stuff. I'm missing a lot of chat here, haven't I? Full-year-old barfly. Glad it's not a mayfly. Daniel Williams is celebrating being 12 months as a barfly. Daniel, thank you very, very much for your support, my friend. It's wonderful stuff. Like I say, the barflies, they keep the thing ad-free. The vPub will never be monetized as long as I've got barfly support, and I don't have to. The reason that every opinion that you will hear tonight is self-funded and fully independent, my opinion and my opinion only, is because of Patreon, because of the support that my patrons have given me over the last 3 years. It wasn't until the start of 2018 that I started a Patreon account, and since then the channel has grown from strength to strength on the back of their support, because it means that I don't need to ask and approach the industry for samples or favours. It means the whiskies, I go out and I pay for those with my own money. That's important because when I hold it in my hands and I judge the whiskey, I know how much it's cost me. It weighs heavy. It's not something that's been given or handed to me. So I appreciate, I understand, and I evaluate it based on the value proposition. And that's thanks to everybody that supports me through Patreon. I'll never cease to be grateful for that, and I'll never tire of thanking you all for it. Thank you so much. Thank you, patrons, and thank you, barflies. Drew from Arizona is saying, I'm getting a sense of where you're going on a Bunnahabhain 12 cask strength, Roy, since it's around £75, I think. I do love it anyway. I'm going to kind of round things out, and I'm going to build up to the Bunnahabhain thing. Absolutely, Drew. There is one here that's worth mentioning. There's not much out of this, and this has been open for a long time. This is part of the Ignored series when I talked about Spey. This is their Trutina, which is probably the purest form of the Spey release, I would say. This is a cask strength version, almost 60% ABV, 59.9. I think that may be deliberate. This is batch 2, and I've not drank a lot out of it, and it's not because I don't like it. It's because it's a very specific thing, and it's very similar, and you'll see the similar neck pour in this. It's going to stay similar to this. This is Glenlivet's take on the same thing. This is Glenlivet Nadurra. Now, they have lots of Oloroso cask expressions. They have different releases of Nadurra out here. This is part of the first fill release. This release goes back to actually 2017, believe it or not. And again, this is a very, very pure form of Glenlivet. There's nothing like this out there in the market unless you pick up a Glenlivet or a Spey from an Indie at a fairly young age. And they're not too expensive. The Spey is a wee bit more expensive. The Glenlivet, I think I picked up for about £52 or something. I've only had one dram out of this bottle, but immediately it reminded me of this Spey Trutina. So again, these are things that you want to sip back to back, because this is about as close as you're going to get to the pure character of a distillery, if that's your thing, to study such a thing. These are occasional pours for me, though, because they are fiddly. These are both very, very spirit forward. If you like spirity drams, you're going to enjoy these. The malt and barley led thing with a wee scoosh of water in both of these, the water takes it immediately away from the kind of tart apple and things, and moves it quite quickly to sweeter stone fruits. So I guarantee you will enjoy both of these whiskies if you have them on hand or you choose to pick them up ever, a lot more with water on the side. These are ones that I would put and then probably not going to replace. There are other Spey releases that I'm going to probably chase, but I'm going to try and spend a bit of time with this one. And certainly Glenlivet Nadurra has a lot of variation that's probably going to be a lot more of a people pleaser than this one. So I would say that these are ones that I would not replace, I don't think. I may change my mind by the time I get to the end of them, though, right? We all change. Our palates change quickly over time. So we've already covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, almost 8 bottles already. It's incredible how much choice there is available. And I haven't even got to the ones that are really setting my world alight right now, that are sitting off to my left-hand side here. Ben, Whiskey with Molly. Ben, I got to hang out with you the weekend. I hope you're keeping well, my friend. It's good to see you. And right, that's me off the bus and in the house, on the laptop, dram in hand, can watch properly now. Thanks again for last Saturday, Ben. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I certainly loved having you all here as well. We managed to, when it comes to raising funds, that's a good way to raise funds, right? There was some wonderful, wonderful whiskey shared, some good chat, and a few laughs as well. It was great, great fun. Sam Clark is saying, Arran, also for the Rumoured cask strength, peated. Yes, of course, they have another one in the Rumoured, the peated version, which is so good it tastes like Arran, just peated, I think, 220 ppm. Super stuff. Good call, Sam. Another one. And then when Lag comes along, again, we're going to be spoiled for choice. There's going to be peated releases from Lag as well, and I'm sure at some point in the future we're going to see a cask strength Lag too. Connor Smith is saying one of my favourite Glenlivets was the Nadurra Oloroso, although the batch I can't remember. I don't think it matters too much, Connor. The Glenlivet Oloroso is going to be really, really good. It's going to be a decent dram from an Oloroso cask, whether it's American oak or European oak. It's going to be interesting, and it's not too expensive. Again, 55 quid, 60 quid thereabouts. So if you're looking for something that's not as expensive as Aberlour's or Bunna these days, Glenlivet are bringing you something. And I think it would be interesting for you to try one. However, Watchman999 is saying Glenlivet is dead to me. Glenlivet. That's interesting, Greg, because I think that there's a lot of boring from Glenlivet. There's a lot of pedestrian. There's a lot of mishandling going on there. But there are steps being made at Glenlivet. The illicit still got a lot of people's attention. They've just brought out the licensed dram, 48% ABV, both of them. A different take on things. Nadurra is good value. Baby in bathwater comes to mind. But there's probably something that's annoyed you. The 16-year-old Nadurra was a lovely Glenlivet. That's right. I think that was one of the original ones. And that was cracking value when it was first released as well, David. That's a great shout. How we wish we'd snagged a couple of those when they were available. Whiskey Novice Jim is in saying, have we touched on Tamdhu Cask Strength yet? Sipping the batch 6 earlier. Lovely stuff. So that's the Tamdhu is their batch strength release, which I think they're up to. What number are you? Batch 6. Wow, they're up to batch 6 already. That's incredible. So they've started to release that much quicker now, probably down to demand. A lot of boring from Glenlivet. Understatement of the year, says Jimmy Legg. And Greg is saying, I admit that I haven't tried illicit still. Fair comments, Aquavite. So I think what's where Greg is disconnected with Glenlivet was the Founders Reserve, the mishandling of the dropping of the 12-year-old age statement and giving us the Founders Reserve and very similar branding. And things that have come out since then, kind of all these kind of really mass market releases that are probably doing a very good job. And by the way, if you're new into whiskey and you're sitting there with a nice Glenlivet Caribbean cask or whatever it may be, and you're very much enjoying it, let me tell you, you're having a very valid and real experience, honestly. And if you hear us talking about that being crap whiskey that you're drinking, understand that it's not that it's crap whiskey. It's whiskey that doesn't engage us as much as it once did. As we've moved along in drinking whiskey, we're looking for different things. We're looking for much more texture, much more density of flavour, much more quality. We're looking for higher ABV. And all of these things tend to be very, very closely aligned. They tend to be in the same package. And as Ralphie keeps talking about that dichotomy of these markets changing and getting further and further apart, you've really got this enthusiast market that are looking for these really special experiences that sip by sip, we're really spending time. And then there's this kind of mass market of whiskey, which is by far the biggest still. And it's just people buying whiskey and they buy their favorite brands, or they buy whiskey and they just drink it. And maybe sometimes they use mixers and things, and that's mass market. But more and more, people are migrating from that mass market through experiences, through this bigger profile of the more enthusiast, more naturally presented product now. And the producers are seeing that the blends are flat, often flat in a lot of markets, sometimes going backwards in some markets. And they're looking at what's happened over the last 4 decades with malt. And they're changing. And they're working out how they can change, how they can pivot, how they can cover both sides of the tracks without diluting their brand or their messaging. Watch how different brands are going to tackle that in the future. Yuri, simply about whiskey, saying, do you remember the Glenlivet Nadurra 16-year-old? It was a very, very good one. I'm still having a bottle for another day. We're just talking about that, Yuri. It was a cracker. Kilko, Brian is in the saying, happy Thanksgiving, Brian, to you as well. And it looks like he's just saying cheers as he arrives. I hope you've got a nice belly full of food. Let's move on to the cask strength whiskies. Before we talk about this pricing issue, which is at the nub of this whole thing, value, right? Value. It's going to take a while before the vPub kind of moves off that thing. I'm going to always be searching for the value, right? I'm going to drag, you'll see what these tops are. These are the ones that are really good. And for interesting reasons, I think. Yes, you're going to recognize this little guy as well. And oh my goodness, you're going to recognize this one too. And you're going to say, Roy, stop it. All these whiskies that you're going to be sharing with us, we can't buy them. We can't buy them. Why are you talking about whiskies we can't buy? Glenallachie 10 cask strength doesn't even hit the shelves anymore. As soon as it appears, it's gone for good reason. Pedestrian malt, let's be honest. Billy Walker's inherited malt. It's good malt, honestly, but it's not exciting malt. It's been made well, but it's been made and handled and matured in a fairly boring way. Billy Walker comes in and completely injects a whole new idea of what whiskey can be to that distillery. Yes, he's heavily reliant on casks today, but that's not the way it's going to be in the future. As soon as we start to see more and more of the malt that Billy has been making, Billy and the team have been making, we're going to see things change drastically at Glenallachie, and there'll be much more spirit-driven releases. But right now, they're very, very highly reliant on casks, and there's nothing wrong with that. See these people that tell you that, oh, everything that you're tasting is from the cask and that's just lazy whiskey. We need to stop this snobbery in whiskey. We understand that people move on in their journey and they get to new places and have new perspectives, but that doesn't mean that this perspective they had yesterday is suddenly redundant and you need to make a mockery or make fun or make people feel small because they're not at your stage yet. I'm getting a wee bit tired of that. These whiskies from Glenallachie right now, most of your flavour notes are going to be cask-led flavour notes that you pick out of them. Does it mean that people are not having wonderful times with them? Absolutely not. Glenallachie is a huge success because of the presentation, because of the price point, because of what they've done, how they've managed to take a pedestrian whiskey and make it pretty wonderful. Can you imagine what they'll do when the spirit is wonderful? He's building a fantastic legacy. I know you can't buy this easily, but if you see it, year by year, it's becoming darker. It's becoming more and more cask influenced, absolutely. But this is one to have. £65. Listen, it's a wee bit pricey, but it's got an age statement on there. You can get it for 60. It's got an age statement on there. And a lot of the cask strength releases that we've been discussing tonight up until this point do not have an age statement. They're non-age statement. It's no coincidence that ones that I'm sharing with you just now are age stated. It's very interesting. And it's not, I've not picked them because they're age stated. I think that these are the best, honestly. 10-year-old from Glenallachie, an absolute belter of a whiskey. Yes, it's cask driven. You'll enjoy it all the same. Springbank's 12-year-old cask strength. I think that we're ignoring Springbank right now. I don't think they're getting a lot of airtime. Why? Because we can't buy the whiskies. We just can't get our hands on it. Honestly, it's not just the UK anymore. You go back to the vPub 3 years ago, I was complaining about not being able to get Springbank. Now everyone's the same right across Europe. And now in North America, we're starting to see where it used to be sitting on the shelf over there. We're starting to see people complaining about not getting their hands on North America. And poor Canada seems to be one of the worst. However, it does appear from time to time. Don't be thinking that Springbank is unicorn stuff, because it's going to come out. This one comes out twice a year. 2 batches of this comes out every single year. And right now, I'm going to guess that a lot of people are hoarding it. They're buying it and sticking it on the shelf, buying it and sticking it on the shelf. It's not going to continue forever. People are going to get to the point where they've got enough. We will start to get our hands on Springbank again. And I'll keep talking about it because I want to encourage everybody to do what these guys have been doing. £55, 12-year-old age statement. Some places you need to pay 60. Don't go to retailers that just abuse the fact that they've got stock and nobody else has. It's happening out there. Please stay away from them. It's only whiskey. Don't encourage shills. Don't encourage people who abuse the ability to buy at wholesale and sell at secondary market prices. It is not acceptable practice. You can get Springbank. You will be able to get it in the future. This has got to be one of the best cask strengths, honestly speaking. Doesn't matter that it changes batch by batch, year by year. Jimmy Lag is saying, ha, ignoring Springbank. It's not that we're ignoring it, right? It's that it's difficult to talk about and enthuse and evangelize about something that people can't buy. So often I'm trying to find other things, and that makes sense. Something that's maybe kind of going to drop into that vacuum that's been left by a lack of Springbank, right? What else is there? What else is engaging? Well, look at what's happening with Glen Scotia. Look at what's happening with Ben Nevis. In fact, the Corlish from Ben Nevis, I don't even have here, but it's another example of exactly what we're talking about. Victoriana from Glen Scotia. I don't have it here tonight, but it's another example of what we're talking about. There are other alternatives out there. So if we talk about Springbank, sometimes we'll have to say, yes, Springbank is going to be difficult to get. But you know what? There's other things out there that you can get. Talking of Springbank, here's their sibling, their sister distillery, just round the corner. This is Glengyle's Kilkerran. This is their cask strength release. This is the most recent one at 56.9% ABV. For me, when I first opened this up, this was dirty. This was very sulfury for me. I'm not sensitive to sulfur, but at first when I opened this bottle, I got the sulfur. Found it mildly off-putting, but it was still delicious. A few sips in, I was enjoying it. Now this bottle has settled down. That note is still there, but it's much quieter. It's much more of a savoury lick now. This, for me, if you could buy this, especially the 2019 release, the 57.1% as well, the recharred sherry cask, fantastic stuff. It's rude how much flavour Kilkerran can get into such a young malt. It's incredible. The last two releases of the 8-year-old have been very cask-driven, but everything before that was much less cask-driven, and the flavour is still there. It's just a cracking distillery, wonderful value as well. We'll talk more about the value in a wee bit. Wonderful stuff. Here's another Islay. In fact, it might be the first Islay I've spoken about tonight other than the Bunnahabhain. This is obviously a powerful peaty Islay. This is not the sherry cask one that we talked about in the Oswas. This is the batch 10 of the Laphroaig's Cask Strength. I won't buy every batch of this. Much like Lagavulin 12 these days, I'll buy it when I'm getting low on it. And even then, it's a consideration on price. But for Laphroaig, they've kind of kept things in check. You can get it for £60, £70 max, of that order. There's an age statement on here. Yes, it's about £5 or £10, £15, maybe more than I want to pay for it. But if you're going to buy one Laphroaig, the 10-year-old, the low ABV Laphroaigs, they're just going to leave you lost and wondering why people rave about Laphroaig the way they do. They're not talking about Laphroaig in the form of a 10-year-old. But drinking something like this, you can get a flash of why Laphroaig is a bit of a legend on Islay. This is excellent whiskey. The cask strength 10-year-old from Laphroaig is absolutely worthy of your time. I would put this in the yes bucket, along with every one of those, the two Campbelltowns, the Springbank and the Kilkerran I just shared with you, and yes, the Glenallachie as well. Three of those, there's not much to talk about on price. They're fair. This is a nudge north of what's comfortable. Still, it's within the envelope and it's worthy, I believe, in my opinion. Which leaves me with a couple of alternatives. Actually, I forgot about this one. Here's one that you can put in the middle as a maybe as well. So alongside all those Arrans and things I was speaking about earlier, such as the standard Arran Bothy quarter cask strength, we've got Tomatin's cask strength as well. There's a good ABV on this one too. This is 57.5 ABV, where the Arran is much more kind of a maybe citrusy led, you could say, if you're drinking them in contrast. This brings a lot more cereal and a lot more barley and a slightly more Highlandy aromatic thing. Sometimes even a wee bit more of a almost, and I don't want to say farmyard or agricultural, but it's moving towards that end of things when you sip it in contrast with the Arran. So a bit more aromatic here, and a bit more bright and fresh from the Arran. But the Arran Bothy and this Tomatin Cask Strength are fairly similar spirits. And I'll wait. The final one I'm going to talk about in a second. I need to have a wee drink of water. Not because of the Cask Strength whiskey tonight, but because of it's a solo session, monologuing. But with 330 of you watching, listen, I really hope you don't mind. Jimmy, like I was saying, but people could buy Springbank before and they loved it. And they still have a bit in their library. I know I do. Absolutely. So, Jimmy, I'm going to take your point. Just because we can't buy something, the biggest, probably you could argue the only thing that the producer can do nothing about is availability. What would we have Springbank do today to change what our complaints are, right? I can see people getting really frustrated. That sense of entitlement comes through when it comes to buying whiskey, right? I can't buy my Springbank anymore. Well, it's because it's so successful. What would you have Springbank do? Because even if they double capacity, which is not going to be something they can do, for the cask strength release, we're going to need to wait at least 12 years to see that coming through. So the producers can do literally nothing about that availability issue that they have today. Maybe they could make sure that their allocations and where the distribution is going is a wee bit more appropriate or balanced. But honestly, we're starting to get into the weeds, I think, there. And I think it's difficult. We don't understand the mechanics and dynamics that are involved there. I would like to see more Springbank going to Canada, Jimmy, absolutely. But I would like to see more kept here as well. Helen is saying, sipping that at the moment, got lots of sulphur too. Great dram now. The Kilkerran 8-year-old she's talking about as well. It seems to get better. Petehead is suggesting cask strength water. I have cask strength water on hand, Petehead. Yeah, I do, Frank. I do, buddy. I'm going to show you something here. As I pull up the most expensive cask strength that I am going to share with you tonight. And I'm only even going to mention it because it remains it's become actually a guilty pleasure now because of the price of the bloody thing. It's so frustrating, because it's beautiful whiskey. It's beautiful whiskey. And I've had this parked on the shelf for a long time, and I've not been going near it because it's expensive now. It's going to be difficult to replace. You can probably guess what I'm talking about. This is actually the 2019 release of Lagavulin 12-year-old. Now, I bought this in 2020. The reason I bought it is because it was £90 at the Lagavulin shop. And the 2020 release was 120, and they were sitting next to each other. I might have made a mistake there, but certainly this one was a good £20 or so cheaper. So I just went, okay, I'm going to save the money and I'm going to buy the older one. I love it. I absolutely love the stuff. What I'm going to talk to you now about is, as I sip this Lagavulin 12, am I sipping what it would... So you go out and buy one of the new ones, the Untold Stories, the Lagavulin 12 today, you're going to have to pay £128 for it now. It's still going up. You can buy it. There's plenty of this stuff, plenty of it. It may be a special release, but it's huge release, huge outturn. Is it £128 whiskey? No. No. Not at all. However, the huge caveat here, there's fan service happening here. There are fans of Lagavulin like me. Now, I may not buy every release every year of Lagavulin 12. I already fell out with it. It was a 2017 that brought me back on board again, and that's back when it was £90. But I've fallen out with it again because it's just getting so expensive now. So I'm not going to be buying it every year. I'll buy it occasionally, and I'll nurse it. Where this used to be a whiskey that I would easily drink and share and get through quickly and replace by buying another one, now it's precious. Now I'm going to be very careful with it. And I look at it through that lens and I say, wait, this is anxiety. This is not £128 whiskey. £90 was already at the top of its what it should be, what they should be charged for this. £90 is the upper limit. When I've got to break £100 for this, I'm going to think very, very carefully. That is a shame. Most of the whiskies that I've shared with you tonight, we can drink them and we can look at the price alongside their peers. We can also drink them and consider, I've just paid X for this whiskey. Is it worth it? Would I pay that again? And we need to do that more and more. And when we decide that maybe not, it's not giving us that value, leave the fan service behind. Don't become a fanboy, a fangirl. Don't do it. There's millions of whiskey out there. If they're going to charge what the market will stand, we need to stand as a market. We need to say, no, we're not paying this price anymore. £128 is far too much for Lagavulin 12. And it's heartbreaking to me. But still, I'm not paying it. I maybe put it at my Christmas list. But that's the fanboy speaking, right? I'm going to show you something. I'm going to do a wee screen share here. And I was playing, and I thought it might be nice to share a visual with you. Falscraft is saying, when judging prices of cask strength whiskies, you'd have to do something like Phil Whiskey Mystery and normalize it to alcohol and age. This does require effort and math, absolutely, but it's right up Phil's street, and it's what he's very, very good at doing, and it makes perfect sense. Sandro is saying, that is that 12-year-old Lagavulin cask strength natural colour and non-chill filtered? Absolutely. It's fully natural. There is nothing going on here. It's a very, very pure expression of Lagavulin. The only thing that's been done to this is that it's gone through a barrier filter, so just to take out any fragments and things like that. Marku Makinen is here saying, just poured a wee dram of 2016 Lagavulin 12, not buying a new one. It's maddening since this is my favourite whiskey alongside Springbank 12 cask strength. Fair play to you, Marku. We're not paying the prices anymore. There will be another whiskey that becomes our favourite whiskey, buddy. I guarantee you. And Multi-Agus Muncher is saying, good to see you mention it, Roy. I know a good few people that were put off by the price of the Buna 12, but I reminded them that Laga 12 was more expensive years ago, and it was accepted. Here is the problem, Matthew. That's what I talked about, what the market will stand. So Bunnahabhain has walked out there and said, well, wait, how much can we charge for this? That's what's happened. They have not said how much, in order for us to make the right amount of profit margin, how much is this going to retail at? They've asked the question, how much can we charge for this? That's what happens. It's the way it is. Okay, as is your right, Distill. It's our right as the market to see what we will stand for. When does Octomore pricing come up here today? Shameful. I don't even talk about it. Octomore is a very, very small... It is a different thing. But I agree. The reason I don't have, Greg, an Octomore on the shelf is the last time I was at the distillery, the cheapest bottle of Octomore I could have picked up at a single-digit age was £145. That's not my whiskey. It's not speaking to me. It's not pointed at me. That's fan service. That's propeller heads, fans that's going to go and do that. Or people that come across a specific Octomore that's really set their world alight and they need to have it. I think there's few of those. Ryan McLeave has said, any non-Scotch cask strength whiskies on the list tonight? Maybe one, Ryan. And Nick Gascoigne is saying, what distillery would you love to see do a cask strength that don't do it at the moment? Loads of them. Name any Diageo distillery, a lot of the Pernod Ricard distilleries. I mean, I'd love to see a cask strength Scapa. I'd love to see cask strength Benrinnes. I'm speaking about large outturn official bottlings here. I would love to see Flora and Fauna. Maybe, if not cask strength, maybe all up to 46, 48% ABV. I'd even pay a wee bit more for it too. I'd like to see them non-chill filter. They could save money by not adding colour and chill filtering and give us a wee bit more ABV. There are so many, honestly, Nick, that I would love to see. And Yuri's saying, I totally agree with you, Roy. Last year I bought a Lagavulin 19-year-old cask strength, and only because it was a fantastic one. So again, you're going to find things that you connect with. Eric Waite, remember, is doing a stream tonight, Thanksgiving Lagavulin stream after we are live tonight. How long have I been banging on for? An hour and 26. There is a quiz at the end tonight, but let me show you this wee thing first. Here is the prices, and it's not exhaustive. I mean, you can see here that I've only listed pretty much one or two more on top of what we've been discussing tonight. But this is the price versus the release. And you can see that down at the lower end, we've got Glenfarclas 105 and Arran Bothy. Between the two of them, depending on what price is on its retail, they can often be about the same price, mid-40s to £50. And then Nadurra is just a wee bit north of that, Glengoyne cask strength, which hasn't come up in the conversation. Still not too expensive, an honest statement from Glengoyne. A lot of people do like it. I tend to find it's a try before I buy for me. Highland Park cask strength, we've talked about that tonight. And here you can see the Tomatin that we've mentioned as well. And then suddenly here, round about this great value here, age statements start. And the Kilkerran comes in with the 8-year-old. Benromac's cask strength is an honest statement again, but quickly back onto age statements for Glenallachie, Springbank with their 10 and their 12-year-old. And that's just south of, or just bang on the kind of 65, 66, 67 pounds line there. Moving along to Victoriana, about the same price, but a non-age statement again. And then back to an age statement with the Laphroaig 10. That's coming up to £70. So that's just getting a wee bit more. And that's where we stop. That's where I stop. Everything north of that, the Abuna, the Tamdu batch strength, Redbreast 12 and Lagavulin 12, way up there, ridiculously expensive. These are suddenly a pause and think purchase now. Most of the time I'm going to walk away because there's just so much else down here that's just honestly such better value. Abuna, we know, is now a lot more expensive. Isn't it amazing how little Abuna has been spoke about now? And I'm just probably talking about our YouTube bubble, perhaps. But I also feel that it's the same out there on the internet generally. Abuna is not held up and praised as much as it used to. And you can maybe argue that they're cashing in on years and years of making a lot less on it, and now they're making their money on it, whatever. But what's really interesting to me is this wee chart shows us where Bunnahabhain 12 is sitting. This is curious to me. Very curious. Let's look at it as well. Just it doesn't really change anything here. All this is a price per percentage. This depends hugely on ABV. So it's a bit of a blunt way of measuring. It's not really valid. But it just reinforces the same thing. If you factor in ABV higher ABV products such as Glenfarclas is 105 and things, it doesn't really change things. The value is here, the age statements in the middle, and the expensive stuff a Buna, Tamdhu, Redbreast 12, and Lagavulin up at the other end. Nothing scientific there, just to kind of plot the prices that we're talking about here. Because this Redbreast from Pernod Ricard, this cask strength, is not only a fantastic whiskey, a fantastic product, but it's a cask strength, 57.6%. There is a batch number on it. This is batch B120 with an age statement. So they're hitting everything here, but they're charging us. Now, I did find this online at a very reasonable £65, but typically it's up as high as £80 and £90. It can get really quite expensive. One of our ethical retailers on the oswa.co.uk retailers page has this at a very good price right now. Redbreast cask strength 12-year-old. I think people are looking at that Redbreast and seeing how successful it is and seeing how much it's selling, and that's going to tell everybody, wait, look at what they're charging for that. And I think that is where some of these prices are coming from. It's difficult to find a core range that has a standard 12-year-old. The Redbreast has a 40% release at 12 years old, and they have a fully fledged natural cask strength at 12 years old as well. So it's quite interesting that they've got the two. And Bunnahabhain has done that for their 12-year-old. Let's pour this wee Bunnahabhain. I've had 3 or 4 drams of this. I poured one out earlier tonight to let it air, didn't I? I'm now pouring a second one, no matter. Yeah, it's here. This is an interesting thing. It makes perfect sense to me why Bunnahabhain would release a 12-year-old cask strength. When I heard that we're releasing it, I got excited immediately. I think they've got almost all of it right here. 12-year-old cask strength, annual release, 2021 edition, put on a label, great ABV, everything is great about it. But I have 2 issues that I do need to share with everyone about it. And I'm going to taste this and I'm going to give you my reaction to it. But the first thing is, this is different from the 12-year-old. The standard 12-year-old is much rounder, fruitier, much more sherry forward than this. Much more sherry forward. This is still a sherry forward style, but not nearly as much. The other thing is that 12-year-old and that 12-year-old, it makes me think that it's the same thing. And now I'm looking at it going, well, is it just a 12-year-old release from Bunnahabhain that just happens to be their cask strength? Or let's say a cask strength release from Bunnahabhain that just happens to be a 12-year-old? Is that what it is? Or is it genuinely a cask strength release of their 12-year-old core range? Which is it? I'm going to say it's the former. This is not the same as the 12-year-old. And it's not just about the amped up ABV. This is treacle. It's all treacle. So I know this, to some people, maybe that would be molasses. This is much more heavy and malt than the 12-year-old is. That kind of makes sense. Maybe the spirit, maybe the alcohol is bringing a more kind of cereal thing. I don't know. It's a maltier thing. There's a yeasty element here. It's drier. It's very oaky. Think tea, think black tea, think tannic. Resinous. Fruit is quiet. Fruit is hiding behind things here. Poached pear. Some booze-soaked poached pear. Starting to, you put your nose in something at this ABV, it's pretty high, 55 point something, 55.1. So you start to get anesthetized to your nose. You need to take a wee break. And it's saline. It's so salty. It's very, very salty. So I had it alongside. I was sipping it alongside its 12-year-old. This was fruity and vibrant and sweet and alive and rich. Christmas, baked spices, very easy sipping, very viscous on the palate. Just doing what Bunnahabhain 12 does very, very well. This was much more challenging. Sip by sip, dram by dram, I think it's getting a wee bit easier. This is malty, treacle, dry. Anyway, cheers. Dense, fully flavoured, lots to unlock here. Oak forward. That treacle thing is carried onto the palate as well. It's so viscous. Wow. So mouth coating, thick and oily, probably the thickest, oiliest sip I've had tonight, even I would go as far to say. Let's see if we can get some coating the glass here and see if I can get this to cling to the glass and so you can see. This is some pretty oily whiskey that we have in the glass. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. Let's get it around a bit. Come on, camera. Yeah, oh, maybe you can just see a wee bit. Unfortunately, not great. Trust me, this is heavy in the palate. It's coating. You can lick it straight off your teeth. Tannic and oaky, malty. Fruit is still, the fruit is locked. Where is the fruit? Where is the fruit? Grapefruit, dark orange, some citrus. I'm looking for the dark fruits, the red fruits, the Christmas fruits. It's hidden. I'm looking for it. I'm hunting it. Maybe that pear thing I was getting on the nose is here a wee bit, but not really. It's much less fruity than you might imagine. This is much more oaky, malty, salty. My goodness. So the finish is so very, very salty. Very salty. But that's a good thing. This is an interesting whiskey. It is very interesting. But it's not the 12. It is not the 12. I almost feel like if they were going to do this, maybe a 10-year-old cask strength, make it a bit cheaper. Make it clearly something different from the 12. Because I think this is going to attract fans of the 12. And I think there is some fan service here. And I think that they know that it's going to sell like crazy. And have put it out there at 75%. And they're going to make hay. And that's fine. Go ahead, Bunnahabhain, and do very, very well. You deserve it. You make amazing whiskey. You've got a problem. There is a million alternatives out there of Bunnahabhain. We can buy cask strength Bunnahabhain from indies all over the place, and we don't pay £75 for it. I sip this, and this is the problem I have with it. This is good whiskey, and I love Bunnahabhain dearly. Bunnahabhain is the type of place that you visit, and you sip the whiskies there, and you fall in love with the place. You leave Bunnahabhain, you want to face the sky and be thankful that you're alive. It is a wonderful, wonderful place. And what Bunnahabhain has achieved in the last 10 years is remarkable. It's fantastic. But as I sip your cask strength 12-year-old tonight, I'm sipping a good whiskey, an interesting whiskey, a whiskey that's different from your standard 12, but I am not sipping £75 worth. If you buy this, you will not be sad that you bought it. Let's be clear. I wonder if you would be drawn to buy another one, or if you would just go back to buying one or two. One of our ethical retailers has this at such a price right now that you can buy two of these for the price of its cask strength sibling. What would you do? This is going to sell anyway, and it doesn't matter what I say. I think they're a tenner too expensive, £15 too expensive. Arguably a nudge more. I think Bunnahabhain 12 needs to be at the same price point as Springbank 12. That's where they should have priced it. Not next to this. They shouldn't have been looking at Lagavulin 12, because guess what? Lagavulin 12 and Redbreast Cask Strength, you can't buy these from indies. Lagavulin you can occasionally, but it's rare. Bunnahabhain has got a million alternatives out there. I've got them on the shelves here. I've got them on the shelf over there. I've just bought a Glasgow Whisky Club for £55, £60, I think it was, at 11 years old, almost the same age. Just intensely gorgeous. This is fan service pricing, I'm afraid. They're charging what the market can stand, and I hope that that's taken as being fair, constructive feedback. This is a good whiskey. This is an interesting whiskey. It's different from the standard 12. I think it's too dear. And I think they've got a problem putting a 12-year age statement on there and it being so different from the 12 up against how many indies there are. Ooh. Helen is saying that's an Xmas present for Andy, so looking forward to comparing it to his beloved 12-year-old. He's going to get a lot of fun out of doing that very, very thing. And it's going to give him angles on Bunnahabhain that probably he's not going to get in the 12. He's not going to regret having it, honestly, Helen. Jimmy Legg is saying, are the Bunna 12 and 12 cask strength from the same cask types? Apparently so. Apparently so. Jordy V is saying the Irishman 17 at 56% is a stunner. Whether it's real cask strength is another question, but around €100 is probably one of the best high ABV older whiskies around. Now, €100 for a 17-year-old is at cask strength. That's not abusive. We're talking about 128, so we're talking about €140, maybe more, for a 12-year-old Lagavulin. Connor Smith is saying, what is your overall thoughts on Bunna 12 cask strength? Is it £75 whiskey? Connor, obviously I'm way behind on the comments here. Hopefully you picked up on my opinion there. I hope I made it very, very clear. I hope it was clear to you. Anyway, just consider, listen, I don't want to be this entitled commentator online and I've got everything I ever asked for and all I've got to do now is step up and pay for it. I know that some of the things that I'm saying, but when there's so much choice out there, with the backdrop of the boom and interest in whiskey, there's some reports coming out just now. I heard Nick Morgan talking about a report where they're predicting a doubling of interest in whiskey, doubling in the next 10 to 20 years. So they're actually starting to get confident about the predictions and their modelling for the future that whiskey is going to continue to grow. So there's a lot of confidence and a lot of kind of bolshiness out there. Springbank have taught you how to do things medium to long term. And everybody before them has taught you how to do things short term. Bank accounts, pockets, and wallets have long memories. When there's so much alternatives out there, you need to be careful where you're placing your product. And if you price it fairly, we will evangelize the hell out of it. We will celebrate it and we will hold it high. When we start having to pay too much, Glengoyne Teapot Dram, Lagavulin 12, whatever it may be, we're going to back off. Aberlour Bunna, we're going to stop celebrating that whiskey because it's too expensive. It's becoming a very, very precious sipping whiskey that we don't feel so comfortable about sharing anymore because we know how much effort and cost there's going to be in replacing it. So it becomes something that even on the occasion that we do buy it, we become, for me and my means I'm talking about, we become much more careful with it. Jimmy Legg is saying, you've got everything you've ever worked for, the same as the rest of us. And he's got worked in capital shouty letters. Thank you, Jimmy. I'll take that, I think, in the spirit that it was intended. And I often think, was it Jack Nicklaus's fantastic phrase that he talks about people that are lucky, and somebody once suggested that he was lucky and he admitted that he was. And he said, you know, I've been very, very lucky in my life, but the harder I work, the luckier I become. It's interesting. Super stuff. Anyway, that is kind of where I am on all of this. And I'm going to summarize by telling you, if you leave the vPub tonight and you go out and you buy one whiskey, one bottle of what I've talked about tonight, the one that I would be most confident about you being happy about, the one that I think you would treasure and you would share and pour for your friends, it would be at the front of your cabinet and you would have no anxiety about replacing it. Honestly, there's quite a few that I could recommend, but I'm going to go for one that is absolutely available. It's always fantastic. It's always at a great price, and it's always going to bring the flavour and the density of flavour. Drink it alongside any of the whiskies I'm talking to you tonight about. Drink it alongside this Bunnahabhain 12. The one I'm going to use as my takeaway is Glenfarclas's 105. The one that did it, the very first one, the OG, the one that came out as the original cask strength whiskey back in the 60s. I think that's quite amazing. I ignore Glenfarclas. And I think, much in the same way I ignore Bunnahabhain, and I'm getting to ignore Glengoyne a wee bit more, is that the ABV is just meaning that it's further and further away from me. The 15 from Glenfarclas is fantastic. They bring us a 46% in their 15-year-old. But the real value is in their cask strength release. Drew from Arizona is saying we'll have to agree to disagree on the taste of the Bunna 12 cask strength. I got your message earlier, Drew, and when I read it, I was like, oh, this guy's loving it. But it's okay for us to feel different about it. And it's okay for you to have sipped that and say, I love this. I absolutely love this. I'm really, really glad that you are loving it. And please leave comments underneath. Don't listen to Roy. I've bought the Bunna 12 cask strength and I do love it. I'm telling you that I'm glad I have this whiskey. I think it's good whiskey. I think it's interesting whiskey. But they have a problem. At £75, there's too much competition out there. And it's not like the competition I've shared with you tonight, Drew. Maybe different out there in Arizona where you are, I know. But they have competition from Bunnahabhain. But Drew says, I agree, the price is a bit higher than it should be. So even Drew, despite you loving it, he's reflective that the fact that the price is a wee bit high. Sandro's saying, yes, 105 Glenfarclas just received a 1 litre bottle as a gift. Sandro, I think you're going to love it. Play with it. Play with it. Have fun with it. Wee drops of water, teaspoons of water. Dilute it heavily. Have fun with it. It's a fantastic dram and a fantastic whiskey. Tony Nelson is saying, don't watch the replay of Sherry Cask Strength blind when you rank the 105 last. That's okay. That's okay, because when I was doing the blind challenge, you know, batch 16 of Aberlour was in there, right? One of the original, really dark, super dark Aberlours. There were some really, really big hitters in there, Tony. I'm telling you tonight, based on value proposition, and when you rank something in the blind challenge as 5th, that doesn't mean you don't like it. It means that on the lineup that you're drinking that night, out of that, it's the one that it's really hard to put one at the back. It's difficult normally to put one at the end. But I'm telling you just now, Glenfarclas 105 at £45 to £50, it's difficult for any of these whiskies to beat it. Kilkerran heavily peated in my glass, says Mark Slinger. Good to have you in. Good to have you in as well, Tony Nelson. If we're celebrating 4 years of the vPub tonight, which we are, which I'm really chuffed about, I seem to remember that Tony Nelson was one of the people that was in the very, very first one ever in Thanksgiving 2017. It's nice to welcome you in again tonight, Tony. Blair Stevenson is saying, I find that 105 is the cask strength option in my most non-whiskey bars too. It's a classic. Absolutely, Blair. I agree with you. It is a classic. And it's been going now for longer than I've been alive. It's quite amazing. It was originally an 8-year-old, as I say, in the late 60s. But more recently, it's become a non-age statement with an occasional 10-year age statement, depending on what dusty bottle you can pick up. Okay, there is a quiz at the end tonight. I'm going to try and keep things neat tonight. It's 11:30. I'm going to try and wind things up before midnight. I'm getting up very early in the morning to catch a flight to Frankfurt. If there are any Barflies heading out to the InterWhisky Festival over this weekend, please, I might be wearing I'll probably just be wearing a shirt or whatever, but I don't need to wear an Aquavitae t-shirt. Most folk know my face. But if you see me there, I'd look forward to shake your hand, maybe raise a wee glass with you while we're there. Whiskey Novice has said, happy 4 years, mate. Thank you very, very much, Jim. Whiskey Novice, my friend. Thank you. Swagger Bear is saying, congratulations on the 4 years. Didn't know. So I mentioned earlier in the show that it was Thanksgiving in 2017 that the first ever live went out. and it's been a pretty much constant thing ever since then, and I'm very, very grateful for it. Truly grateful. Jimmy, like I said, bought me a dram. I forgot about the anniversary. Have a dram on me. May there be 40 more years. Let's both raise a glass to that thought, Jimmy Legg. Thank you very much, my friend. Cheers to you. Treacle. Very treacle. Anybody that knows the tin of treacle that you get in the UK, I don't know what it's called elsewhere on the planet. Some baked goods coming in now. What you want to do with this as well is play with water more than I have tonight, and probably that's how we're going to unlock the fruit here. And you might be able to access the fruit straight away. I'm struggling a wee bit with it tonight. Bit of citrus, bit of burnt candied orange actually now on the finish. It's very mouth coating, lovely texture, very oily, thick. And Jimmy like is saying, yes, please wear a shirt. Jason McDonald is saying. My first 105 was magical in 2014. The second one was a dud in 2017. May need to revisit it. That's the amazing thing about Glenfarclas generally, not just the 105, is that batch variation is a real thing. So as much as it is to be careful of, it's something to celebrate as well, because you do get some really fantastic releases. Falscraft is saying, sorry, but in the face of German situation, I will not be in Frankfurt. I know, listen, everybody has to prove they have to take a test on the day. And I know they've put a mask mandate in and things like that. Things are becoming more and more difficult by the day. And I find myself considering carefully the situation in Frankfurt. But the way that they've structured it, I hope that I'm turning up to a pretty safe event, as safe as it can be. The situation in the UK in terms of numbers isn't a hell of a lot better, if I'm honest, my friend. Peter Lee saying, well, Gel, that you're going away to Europe for a whiskey weekend, says Peter Lee. I know, Peter, it will happen. It's coming to us soon. Glasgow Whiskey Festival, please let the COVID numbers be in check, because February next year for Glasgow Whiskey Festival, it's going to be great, great fun. And Nick Swindon is saying, what about Kilkerran heavily peated cask strength? I mentioned cask strength. I didn't talk about the heavily peated release, because the only peated release from Kilkerran is a cask strength heavily peated release, and it's peat in progress. It's still a peat in progress. It's not core. Well, it's not the core range release yet. They're still going through that kind of thing. I have it here, and we could have talked about it, but there's just so many whiskies to talk about, honestly. Danny Hebbington has bought me a dram. Congratulations on 4 years, Roy. I hope you got on with this Bunnahabhain 12 cask strength I just bought a few hours ago. I hope he was hoping that he gets on with it. Danny, I have no doubt that you will. Don't worry, my friend. Tony Nelson is saying, happy to be a part of the first show. Cheers to 4 more. And Al has also bought me a dram to say, congratulations on 4 years, Roy. Here's to the next 40. Safe journey tomorrow. To Al, to Tony Nelson, and to Danny Hebbington. Hey, thank you all, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Cheers. I'm pouring no more tonight. Got to be up very early in the morning. Very much looking forward. I just want to be with my friends again. That's the appeal, is just to hang out with people, with whiskey folk, to be in that environment again, and just to enjoy it, to be safe, to take care, to be careful. But I miss people. I have missed people terribly over the last couple of years, and I know that all of you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm very lucky to be able to do it tomorrow, and I hope that it's safe for everyone. Who's ready for a wee quiz at the end? Have we had enough cask strength theme? Because I have got a wee change tonight in the quiz at the end. There is a wee bit of a theme. I hope that you enjoy it. It is a cask strength themed quiz. Eric is saying, just peeking in, planned my Christmas time off, the studio around the vPub on Thursdays. Miss them, you and all the Barflies. We miss you right back, Eric. We know that you're picking up on the replay. Thanks for supporting. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for everything, my friend. Hey, we miss you when you're not here. Your bar stool is sitting there empty, waiting for you when you can make it. Whiskey Lover Society is in as well. Nice stream. Cheers. This Whiskey Lover Society is putting out some new content as well over on YouTube as well. Check out Whiskey Lover Society. It just started out this year, I think. It sounds like a South African accent. Maybe I'm mistaken there. It sounds like that to me. Ross Fudd is saying, I think Brad Smith is right. Molasses is treacle in the US. I think that's what I said a bit earlier. And I second guessed myself. I wasn't sure if it was molasses. But it's thick, black. It's thicker than engine oil, right? But yes, that's kind of what I'm getting from Bunna 12 Cask Strength. Super stuff. Anybody that's ready for a wee quiz at the end, strap in. It's going to be a good one tonight. The theme has been that the opening 5 tend to be a wee bit easier, a wee bit gentler, and then things get tough on the return 5 as well. Good luck, everybody. It's always multiple choice. Thank you all. Still 260 plus of you in hanging out for the quiz at the end. Please stay. You might have a wee bit of fun with this one. What have I got left in the glass? I've got my original Bunna that I poured, and I think I've put a wee bit of scoosh of water in this. Maybe not. Let's put a wee bit of water in it. Let's see how it clouds. Oh, you get big swirls going on. Absolutely. There's a maelstrom in the glass now with that scoosh of water going in. And what's the other one I've got here? This will be enough whiskey for me this evening, I think. Got to be up nice and early in the morning, and I'm excited. My usual 5 out of 10 quiz brain is ready, says Jerry Miller. Fantastic stuff. Helen is saying, quiz, let's go. Whiskey Lovers Society is saying thank you. You're very welcome, my friend. I hope you just keep bringing the content as long as you enjoy it, and you will find an audience, my friend. Everybody that brings passion, a sharing spirit, finds their audience. Can everybody see that okay? Let's get on with it. Question 1. Good luck, everyone. It's multiple choice. You're only keeping your own score, and you're only playing against yourself. Only share your scores if you really want to. Question 1. Glenlivet release cask strength expressions called Nadurra, which is Scots Gaelic for what? What is Nadurra Scots Gaelic for? Is it A, pure, B, natural, C, strength? Nadurra. We talked about I've got their first fill bourbon release here, just freshly opened. That bottle's been around a long time, 2017. I only bought it very, very recently. Freshly opened tonight, but they've got all Rosso releases and various other ones as well. But we want to ask, my goodness, everybody knows this one. Nadurra is obviously Gaelic for natural. Absolutely well done, everybody. It looks like almost everybody kicked it out of the park. Question 2, Glenfarclas first released its 105 in which year? A, 1963, B, 1968, and C, 1973. I gave this away tonight. I think I've said it on a couple of occasions. When did we first see the 105 released from Glenfarclas, the OG official bottling of a cask strength product? Master Malt has a flash sale on Glenfarclas 105 at the moment, £42, says Al. Well, that is some very good value Christmas dramming, I have to say. I also noticed that it wasn't much more than that on, I think, Royal Mile Whiskies, maybe Tindrum actually, I'm not sure. One of the ethical retailers had it at a decent price as well. B, everybody thinks this is also B, 1968. Absolutely, you were all paying attention and listening. Glenfarclas 105. 105 was the old British Imperial Proof, 120 US, 60% ABV. First released in 1968. 53 years old. Question 3, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society's first cask, 1.1, was from which distillery? I may have shared this with you when I was telling the wee stories earlier. Is it A, Bowmore, B, Glenlivet, C, Glenfarclas? 1.1. Frank wasn't listening, says Jimmy. Frank had maybe taken a wee bit of leave. Did he get it wrong? What was 1.1? I can tell you that all of the whiskies listed there are within the first few distillery numbers of the SMWS, but as most of you are answering absolutely spot on, Glenfarclas, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the Pip Hills story, the first ever release from official SMWS at least, was a Glenfarclas. 1975, bottled in 1983, made it an 8-year-old. Question 4. In which of these places is it illegal to sell a bottle of cask strength whiskey? A, Norway, B, Alaska, C, India. One of those places, I can't say countries because Alaska is obviously not a country. Which of these places is it illegal to sell a bottle of cask strength whiskey? This is interesting to me because they've capped what the maximum bottling strength is for, I think, alcohol generally, not just whiskey. And it seems to be a bit backwards. It seems to be a bit odds, the way I understand it anyway. But it is. Jimmy Legacy, and I think I just read this. I can tell you that there's a banana skin in there because Norway, you cannot export cask strength to above, I think, 60% or 59.9 ABV. I'm not sure. I think there's something about Norway. Alaska is obviously part of the US, so it's in there to give you a 50-50 at it. It is a wee bit of a banana skin because of the Norway thing, but I can tell you that it is C, India. And depending on what source you read to check this out, some people tell you it's 50% ABV, which would make sense because we see Amroots and things released at 50% ABV. But then again, Amroot also have a cask strength version. Maybe it's export only. But some other sources tell you that it's 48.5% ABV, which is odd. Jimmy Leg is saying it was in the yearbook, right? I think you could be right, Jimmy Leg. I think you could be right. I was reading up on cask strength whiskey, so I read a lot of stuff. It could have well been in the yearbook. The yearbook is a fantastic read. Fernando is saying option D, Mercosur 2. Fantastic. Question 5, always the picture question. So we've got a picture here from Graham Fraser. You might notice there's an ass hat here. I know that you're looking at this picture and you're getting excited because you know exactly these twin pagodas are iconic. We know exactly what distillery we're looking at here. The water wheel at the front, the nice manicured gardens and things. So you know what distillery we're looking at. But I'm going to ask you to make this an ass hat. What kind of bird is this? Graham Fraser has been taking this picture here and he's obviously snapped a bird as it flew across the scene. This blurry image of a bird. Obviously, I'm not asking you what kind of bird this is. That would be a ridiculous ass hat question. I'm asking you, it's still difficult, but I'm asking you, comparing this distillery to its sibling Aberlour, how much does it sell as a single malt? So this distillery that we're looking at here, let's compare it to its sibling. It's under the same ownership. Aberlour, how much does it sell as a single malt? A, it sells less than 1% of what Aberlour sells. B, globally, it sells about the same as what Aberlour sells. Or C, in 2019, it sold almost twice as much as what Aberlour sold as a single malt. Connor Smith is saying, a fast one. Connor, if we ever share a dram together, that reminds me of a funny story when I was in Italy one time. There was a bird story. You can ask me about that. It's a UFO, says Eric Waite. And Alice saying, Agua Video, one that flies. Marco is saying seagull and A. And Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, interesting, I'll go for A. Greg's Whiskey Guide is in France. He's very familiar with the brand Aberlour over in France, aren't you, Greg? Rob Halford is saying, is it an unladen swallow? Jimmy Leg is saying A for Aquavitae. Well, most of you have got this absolutely right. We're looking at Strathyla Distillery here, which is owned by Pernod Ricard, who also own Aberlour. Anybody that's ever been to France will know that if you see a malt whiskey behind a bar, it tends to be Aberlour that you'll see. Yes, less than 1% because Strathyla is one of the backbone malts for the blend, especially Chivas Regal. Less than 1% of it is sold as a single malt when in comparison to Aberlour. Tiny amounts by comparison. And what we do get is a 40% in the UK, 40% 12-year-old single malt that doesn't do Strathyla justice at all. I would love to be able to taste Strathyla at cask strength. Can you imagine? Question 6. We're on the back straight now. What happened to Redbreast single pot still Irish? in the 1980s? Something happened to Redbreast single pot still Irish in the 1980s. A, it disappeared completely. B, it moved from Dublin to Cork. C, it changed from a cask strength release to a 12-year-old. What happened to Redbreast in the 1980s? Jimmy Legacy, and I think I read this too. C, because of the theme and nothing else. Andrew, you've slipped on the banana skin here. I can tell you that it did not change from a cask strength release to a 12-year-old. Sorry, Jimmy Leg as well. For the simple reason, it had already moved from Dublin to Cork in 1971 when it was a brand that was owned by Ghiblis. But in 1985, when Ghiblis finally sold the failing brand to, it would have been Irish Distillers back then, it's still Irish Distillers now, it disappeared completely. The brand disappeared. And in fact, back then in the 1980s, the only single pot still Irish that was still available was trickling tiny amounts of Mitchell's Green Spot, also serviced from Irish Distillers. So all the powers, all the single pot still Irish that we're able to enjoy from all the Spot series and Redbreast and so many, many more, there was only one. It came back from 1985, it deleted, it came back in 1991, and it's gone from strength to strength. It's got a huge fan base around the world now. Delicious whiskey too. Slipped on that banana, says Jimmy Leg. Aye, you did, my friend. Question 7. The 2019, and so that should read 2020, sorry, instead of 202. The 2019 and 2020 Diageo special releases of Lagavulin 12 featured what on their labels? A, eagles and thistles. B, lions and fire. Or C, seabirds and barley. 2019 and 2020 special releases from Diageo. What did the Lagavulin 12 feature on the label? Alice saying, no chance of enjoying a blue spot. I know, very, very difficult to get a hold of. It's all over social media right now. Maybe there's a new batch came out, but I have been fortunate to try a couple of samples because the community have been good in sending it in to me. I think it's very, very interesting. I think I would love to enjoy it at just a wee bit older age. It was a 7-year-old and pretty pricey too, charging what the market will stand. And I know there's not a lot of it around perhaps, but Irish distillers are huge, absolutely huge. You managed to get this absolutely right. Maybe Lions and Fire is much more in theme with the 2021 release, but Eagles and Thistles is absolutely right. Anybody that answered A, give yourself a point. We're getting through this quite quickly tonight. Good. The old E&T, Eagles and Thistles. Greg's Whiskey is saying, I've never seen the blue spot here, to be honest. Yeah, I've never seen it on a shelf, that's for sure. Rob Calder is 3 out of 7 looking at the crowd. Rob, you do what you can, my friend. The crowd is usually a safe bet, except Matthew Edgeworth is saying, damn it. Tony Nelson celebrating his pass on 5 out of 7. Highlands on 6 out of 7. Whiskey with Molly, Ben on 7 out of 7. Fantastic, Ben. Good stuff. Question 8. In recent years, now I'm suggesting, look at the icons here. In recent years, Anok released a cask strength version of its legendary 16-year-old. But which of these statements is true? A, to celebrate Anok's distillery's 125 years. B, it retailed for around £100. C, at 16 years, it was still above 60% ABV. One of those statements is true. This is an asshat question. There is also a banana skin. In recent years, Anok released a cask strength version of its legendary 16-year-old. But which of the following statements is true? It was released to celebrate Anok Distillery's 125 years. It retailed for around £100. Or at 16 years, it was still above 60% ABV. Oh, dearie me, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this. There is no such thing as Annoch Distillery. Annoch Distillery does not exist, and it could never have celebrated 125 years. Knockdhu Distillery, where the Annoch, the brand, is made, could have celebrated 125 years, and it did, but that's not the answer I was looking for, of course. It was below 60% ABV. The true statement there is it retailed for around £100. I apologise. The asshat icon is there. I hope that you were going to use that to help you there, and a banana skin as well. There was lots of warning lights up there, but just throw the hate. I'll be happy to read it out to everyone too. He is right, so why doubt? No, Annoch Distillery, there's no such thing as Knockdhu Distillery. Whiskey with Molly is throwing us. Did I just see Jason Whiskey Wise's logo in? No, I didn't. I saw Jason McDonald with a facepalm emoji. Off reading it correctly is always the key. Well and truly slipped on that peel. What? Bruno Martins is raging from Lisbon. Petehead is saying B was not correct. Way cheaper here. Okay, that might be true. But that is a true statement. It retailed for around £100. And the place that you pay pounds. Damn it, 6 out of 8. That's not bad. Aquavite, good trickery. And Matthew Edgeworth is saying technically correct. The best kind. The Whiskey with Molly is using his emojis very well. The Roy emojis and the asshat emojis right next to each other. Superb. 9. Which distillery names one of its cask strength core releases after a place of shelter? Surely this is a freebie thanks to the lounge tonight, as this question came up as we were chatting. Jerry Miller saying didn't slip on the banana but still missed it. Unlucky, Jerry, unlucky. Are you heading for your pass mark, my friend? Are you going to make it tonight? Which distillery names one of its cask strength core releases after a place of shelter? Is it A, Loch Lomond, B, Arran, C, Tamdhu? What does RTF stand for? What's RTF? What's the acronym there? Why is it going over my head? But we're right back on track here. Absolutely, everyone. Well done. You've got this right. We're talking about, of course, the Bothy cask strength release, which is from Arran Distillery, a place of shelter. We even discussed exactly what a Bothy was earlier. So that was very, very helpful. Well done. So let's see how we're doing on the scores before we hit the asshat at the end. Oh, Rob Calder is needing the asshat for a pass mark now. Rob is on 7 out of 9. Too slow. Well done, Rob. Falscraft 7 out of 9. Greg's Whiskey Guide 6 out of 9, I guess. Hellswood 7 out of 9. Steve Atkiss 8 out of 9. Steve Atkiss that managed a 10 out of 10 last week, didn't he? Superb. RTFM. Read the effing manual. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Petehead. Read the manual, of course. Terrific stuff. Gino Kumo, 7 out of 9. You guys are amazing. And Thomas, 7 out of 9 as well. 8 out of 9 for Peter Lee. Well done, Peter. Fantastic. Gino Kumo, 7, as I say that. Gregor Dinkman not scoring so well tonight. 2 out of 9, my friend. Just an off night for you, Gregor. A couple of tricky questions, especially in the back 9. Don't worry about it. Fernando, 6 out of 9, so not so bad. Absolutely. That's a pass mark. Absolutely, Fernando. And Jimmy Legg is saying rich text format for RTF. And Greg's Whiskey is saying maybe I'll get a 10 out of 10 in another life. Absolutely, Greg. You're a knowledgeable fella. You will, buddy. Asshat at the end, everyone. Strap in. John Campbell recently joined Lochleigh Distillery from where? Oh my goodness. Everybody knows where John Campbell joined Lochleigh from. But this is an asshat question. A, 11 years at Laphroaig. B, 16 years at Laphroaig. C, over 25 years at Laphroaig. John Campbell joined Lochleigh Distillery from after 11 years at Laphroaig, 16 years at Laphroaig, or over 25 years at Laphroaig. Big news. one of the most under the radar things in recent whiskey, Lochleigh Distillery in itself. And I didn't pick up a single rumour about John Campbell leaving Laphroaig before the official announcement came out. I think that's a wonderful masterstroke by Lochleigh to get somebody of that calibre in running their distillery. Quite an enigmatic character is our John Campbell. It was at Frankfurt, actually. It was the masterclass I had hosted by John Campbell in 2018, I think, going back as far as 2018. Would that be right? 2018, yes. And it was fantastic to listen to him. Gregor Dykeman is saying, Peterlee, I wish I could blame the alcohol. Don't worry about it, Gregor. B seems like too weird a number, so it must be B. I'll say B because I heard it before and surprised it wasn't so long time there. And Whiskey with Molly saying, I have missed why this is an asshat. Don't be tricky on us. Well, it's an asshat because the answer should simply be just Laphroaig. But of course, I'm asking how much time did he spend at Laphroaig. A is definitely correct if B is correct. A and B are correct if C is correct. So, Akavite. I like the way you think, Frank. I really do. Spot on. Over 25 years at Laphroaig. John Campbell, it doesn't look old enough to be 25 years at Laphroaig, but he is. He's over 25 years at Laphroaig, and he's moved over to the mainland to Ayrshire, to work at Lochleigh Distillery. Fantastic. Let's see how the scoring is. I don't think anybody managed a 10 out of 10 tonight. We'll just get rid of that. Let's see. Ever tell a user that there was a biological interface error? That's right, Jimmy. Are you blaming me, though? Or did you have the biological interface error tonight on the banana skin? Daniel Williams is on 8, along with Gino. Too Slow Rob is on 8 as well. Fantastic. Jimmy Legg on 7. BMO on 7. Pete Head on 6. 8 out of 10. Listen, everybody, I can see there's been 3 down thumbs tonight. I'm hoping that I get some kind of message back as to why. Maybe it was the opinions or something that I shared, but it doesn't matter. We still exist in one of the rare platforms that actually count the down thumbs, and it's a useful metric. But also the up thumbs is a very useful metric too. I forget to leave enough up thumbs very, very often, and it's nice to get a wee reminder now and again. If you've enjoyed yourself tonight, if you've enjoyed hanging out with me and celebrating 4 years of this crazy thing that we call the vPub that I've come to love so much, leave a wee up thumb, please. Jimmy Legg is saying, I had it. Aye, of course you did. Sandro is saying, wonderful vPub, 6 out of 10. Grazie, Roy. Grazie, mille, Sandro. Thank you. It's very, very nice to have you in. Malt Minion Chuck is in as well. Fantastic. Never spotted you tonight, Chuck, on an 8 out of 10 as well. Connor Smith on 8 out of 10. Sid Martin 9, Sid you star. That looks like it's going to take the plaudits along with Cascode. Good to see Cascode in tonight as well. Wonderful stuff. Is it early morning Friday for you too? Mark, who is in on 9 out of 10, fantastic. Matthew Edgeworth, Tony Nelson, both on 7. No bad, says Matthew. I agree with you, no bad at all. I would go as far to say draw. Wonderful stuff. Jeff Whiskey ended on a 6 out of 10. Jeff, good for you. That's a pass mark. Manu Vasquez, that looks like a new name. Manu, welcome here on 8 out of 10 score as well. Fantastic stuff. Yash on 9 out of 10, my best score yet, and celebrating. Fantastic, Yash. Well done. Superb. Just scanning. Peter Lee got a 9. Superb. Sid Martin, I mentioned his 9. Wonderful stuff. I'm definitely not. Paul Raymond just logged in. He's on 0 out of 10. I'm sure you'll do much better on the replay, Paul, but it's nice to welcome you in, even if it's a wee bit late. Fantastic stuff. Helen is saying, another enjoyable evening. Happy 4th anniversary. Enjoy Frankfurt. Slash you, Helen. Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to it. Remember, everyone, that wee link I dropped in. If you want to go over and snag yourself some amazing whiskey-themed stuff for a very good charity, My Luma UK, is part of the new Dram Drinker fundraiser initiative, including you might be able to pick yourself up one of Frank Peathead's infamous handmade wood-turned Glencairn glasses. There's a couple or 3 available over there. I'll just drop that in so everybody can click on. And remember, Eric Waits, Thanksgiving live stream, Lagavulin. He mentioned it to me beforehand, and I'm happy to send some traffic over there if you're still up for a wee bit more whiskey time. Whiskey Novice Jim is saying, night, Roy, Slancha, and safe travels. Thank you, Jim. Too Slow is saying, thanks, Roy, and all the Barflies. Thanks to you, Rob, too. Pete Ed is saying, have a great fun in Frankfurt. Not jealous at all. Sleep well with everybody, Slancha Va. Thank you, Roy. Thank you for a great evening, says Ross. Thank you, buddy. Gino is saying, I had a really nice evening with you all. Have a nice weekend, Roy, and safe travels. Thank you, Gino. Andrew Pierce is saying, have a great trip, Roy. I'm sure it'll be a brilliant weekend. Superb. David Owen is saying, cheers, Roy. Have a great fun in Germany, and be careful. I will, David. Thank you, my friend. Gregor Dykeman is saying congrats on 4 years of Aquavite. Thank you, Gregor. Matthew is saying that's me to bed now. Anyway, I'm a newcomer, but congrats on 4. Take it easy, mate. Matthew, it's been wonderful to have you in here tonight, pal. Thank you very, very much. Fernando saying thank you, Roy. I really enjoyed it tonight, and good night, everyone. Jimmy Legg is saying, how's the kidney kid doing? It's doing very, very well. It's not finished yet. It's got a few more weeks to run, Jimmy, and there might be wee things that we can do to keep that pot growing in the future. But it's doing very, very well. Connor Smith is saying, enjoy Frankfurt. Looking forward to next week. I'm going to raise this wee glass. I'm just going to blend. What have I got here? Was it at this? I've got a wee bit of the Highland Park left. I've got a wee bit of the Bunnahabhain. I'm mixing 2 Islay whiskies here. You can shout at me if you like. But I'm doing it just to raise a glass to you guys. And say thank you very, very much. Thank you for everything that you've allowed me to do over the last 4 years as well. The only reason that I've stuck at something for 4 years, honestly speaking, is because of you. There's no way I would be able to keep this going. But I so much look forward to turning up every week and being challenged to think up new things to talk about and think about something that might be interesting, to find new guests and wee things that we can do with the community to bring a wee bit of fun to Thursday nights around whiskey. You've made it possible for me. I absolutely love that so many of you have been here for so long. I absolutely love that so many of you are here maybe for the first time tonight, and people that have come along much more recently. It's great to spend Thursday nights with you, and I look forward to what Jimmy Legg was talking about earlier, another 40 years. That would be amazing. But as long as you enjoy being here, I'll keep bringing the content. I look forward to hanging out with you all again next week. And until then, I'll raise a wee glass and say, Barflies, beautiful whiskey folk, Slanjava, you're all very dearly loved.